My grandfather spent 40 years restoring a single car. Every Saturday morning for as long as I can remember, he was out in that garage with his sleeves rolled up and grease under his fingernails, sanding a panel, tuning the engine, hand-stitching the leather seats one stitch at a time. A 1966 Ford Mustang, candy apple red with a burgundy undertone. He mixed himself because factory red wasn't deep enough for a man who believed that anything worth doing was worth doing slowly. That car was his cathedral, his love letter to my grandmother, his 40-year promise kept one bolt at a time. When I walked into the garage that Monday morning 6 months after we buried him, the car was gone. Just gone. An oil stain on concrete and an empty space where 4 decades of patients used to live. My sister Vanessa told me she sold it, $28,000. Her fiancé Mark needed the money for a wedding deposit in Dubai. She said it like she was telling me she'd returned a sweater. But the next morning, the man who bought the car called me and said 7 words that changed everything. Your grandfather hid something inside it. I need to back up. My name is Chloe Ramirez. I'm 34 years old and I work the night shift in the ICU at Phoenix General Hospital. I've held the hands of strangers while machines decided whether they lived or died. I've delivered news that ended marriages and started grief that would last decades. I've been cursed at, grabbed, spit on, and thanked with flowers by people who don't remember doing any of those things. None of that prepared me for what I found in that garage. Or rather, what I didn't find. 6 months earlier, we buried Arthur Ramirez, my grandfather. The man who raised me and Vanessa after our parents' divorce scattered the family like shrapnel. Mom moved to Portland. Dad moved to a bar stool. Arthur moved us into his house in the same quiet Phoenix neighborhood where he'd lived for 37 years, put us in the bedroom that used to be his office, and never once made us feel like we were anything other than home. He was a forensic accountant, 40 years of reading numbers the way surgeons read x-rays, tracing money through corporations and shell companies and fraudulent balance sheets. He testified in federal court 11 times. He wore the same gray suit every time because he said juries trust a man who doesn't try to impress them. He was the most patient human being I have ever known. He built things slowly. He believed that was the only way to build things that lasted. The house was his. He left it to both of us, Vanessa and me, equal shares. Vanessa had moved into an apartment in Scottsdale with Mark about a year before Arthur died, but I stayed. The house smelled like Arthur. Folgers coffee and Old Spice and the faint sweetness of pipe tobacco he quit smoking 15 years ago, but never quite washed out of the curtains. I couldn't leave that smell. I worked my 12-hour night shifts at the hospital and came home to Arthur's kitchen and drank coffee from his Diamondback's mug and pretended the silence was just him sleeping in the next room. That Monday morning I pulled into the driveway at 6:47 after a brutal shift. 2 codes, 1 we saved, 1 we didn't. My scrubs smelled like hospital soap and adrenaline, and the particular exhaustion that lives in your bones after you've watched a monitor go flat and known there was nothing left to do but call it. I walked through the kitchen, set my bag on the counter, poured water, and looked through the window toward the garage. The side door was open. I always closed it. Arthur taught me that. Close the garage, kiddo. The desert gets in everything. I walked across the yard, pushed the door wider, and stepped into the emptiest room I have ever stood in. The Mustang was gone. I stood there for a full minute doing what I do when a patient's vitals shift and nobody else has noticed yet. I held still. I breathed. I looked at everything. The oil stain on the concrete floor, dark and wide, shaped like a heart split down the middle. The workbench along the back wall with Arthur's tools still hanging on shadow boards, socket wrenches arranged by size, the air compressor he rebuilt himself crouching in the corner like a tired dog. The smell was still there, motor oil and old leather and the dry mineral scent of Arizona dust. But the center of the room, the space where the Mustang had lived for 40 years, was empty. Just air and absence where something beautiful used to be. I touched the workbench, ran my fingers across the surface the way you touch a hospital bed after the patient is gone, and the sheets have been stripped, and there's nothing left but the shape of where someone used to lie. Arthur's restoration journal sat open near the vise. A thick spiral notebook, pages yellowed, every entry dated in his precise accountant's handwriting. Parts ordered, paint codes, torque specifications, mileage logs, 40 years of Saturdays documented in blue ballpoint ink. I picked it up, flipped to the last entry, dated 7 weeks before his stroke. Chloe's birthday next month. Surprise her. She's ready. 40 years, and this old car still teaches me patience. Can't wait to see her face when she turns the key and hears that engine for the first time, knowing it's hers. My girl. She'll understand what this car really... It stopped mid-sentence. The pen trailed off the edge of the word, a thin blue line running into nothing. 3 weeks later, Arthur collapsed at his desk. Massive stroke. I held his hand in the ICU for 11 hours. I knew the rhythm of those monitors better than anyone in the building. I heard the change before the alarms triggered. I was the first person in the room to know he was gone, and I was the last person to let go of his hand. A dried flower fell from between the journal pages when I turned them. Small, purple, pressed flat by the weight of months. Lavender. I held it in my palm. Arthur grew lavender in the backyard. Had for decades. Dried it on the kitchen windowsill, sewed it into little cloth bags with clumsy stitches that made me laugh every time. He hung them in the Mustang. Said it kept the leather from cracking. But I knew the truth. Lavender was my grandmother Clara's favorite. She died when I was 4. Arthur kept the lavender alive for 40 years after, the same way he kept the car alive, the same way he kept us alive. Some men grieve with silence. Arthur grieved with maintenance. I set the flower back in the journal, then I noticed the floor. Fresh tire marks. Not the Mustang's tires, which I knew by tread the way I knew Arthur's handwriting. These were wider, heavier, trailer tires. Someone had backed a flatbed into this garage, loaded a 2,000-pound classic car and hauled it away. You don't need a flatbed to drive a car 3 miles to a mechanic's shop. The Mustang ran fine. Arthur had it tuned and running 2 months before he died. I remember the sound, the deep 440 Magnum rumble that shook the garage walls and made the wrenches rattle on their hooks. That engine didn't need a flatbed. Someone chose to use one. Someone planned this. I called Vanessa. 3 times. Each call went to voicemail. Her voice, bright and rehearsed, telling me to leave a message and she'd get back to me. I didn't leave a message. Some things you don't say to a recording. I sat on the garage floor with my back against Arthur's workbench and his journal in my lap. The concrete was cool through my scrubs. The oil stain spread in front of me like a dark mirror. Somewhere outside, a mourning dove called from the Palo Verde tree in the side yard, the same tree Arthur planted the year I graduated nursing school. Every good thing deserves a witness, he said, patting the dirt around the roots. I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I'm starting to. I thought about the last time I sat in this garage with Arthur, 2 months before the stroke, a Saturday. He was adjusting the timing on the Mustang and I was handing him wrenches the way I'd been handing him wrenches since I was 8 years old. He looked at me over the engine and said, "You know what I love about this car, kiddo? It doesn't lie. You put good work in, you get good work out. Every bolt, every gasket, honest machine." He wiped his hands on a shop rag and smiled. People could learn something from a Mustang. He taught me to drive in that car. Desert road east of Mesa. Summer I turned 16. The Superstition Mountains burning red in the rearview mirror. "Both hands on the wheel," he said. "Feel the engine. Don't fight it. Listen to it. The car will tell you what it needs." I stalled it 4 times before I found the clutch point. He never raised his voice. Never grabbed the wheel. Just sat there in the passenger seat, patient as a man who had spent 40 years rebuilding an engine 1 gasket at a time and said, "Try again, kiddo. You'll get it." I got it. I remembered something else about that last Saturday in the garage. He'd been quieter than usual, kept looking toward the house like he was expecting someone. At one point he stopped working, stood up straight and said, "Chloe, if anything ever happens to this car, you come to this garage first. Before you call anyone, before you do anything, come here first. Promise me." I'd promised. I thought he was being dramatic. Thought it was an old man's worry about a car he loved too much. I didn't understand. Not then. Now I was sitting in the empty garage at 6 in the morning with no sleep and a dead man's journal, and the slow, cold realization that Arthur Ramirez, forensic accountant, the most careful man I have ever known, had anticipated this. He knew someone might sell the car. He knew, and he prepared. Something was wrong. Not wrong like a bad day. Wrong like the feeling I get in the ICU at 3 in the morning when a patient's numbers start drifting before the alarms catch up. That feeling that lives somewhere between your ribs and your spine, the one that says, pay attention, something is about to change, and if you miss it, you can't get it back. That feeling had been whispering to me since I opened the garage door. Now it was screaming. I stood up, looked around the workbench one more time, and that's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper wedged into the gap between the workbench and the wall. Not hidden exactly, placed deliberately. In a spot only someone who knew this garage, who had spent years leaning against this bench, who had reached behind it 100 times to retrieve a dropped socket or a runaway bolt, would ever think to look. I pulled it free, unfolded it, Arthur's handwriting, a phone number with a Scottsdale area code, and below it, in careful block letters, if the car is gone, call this number first. Ask for Harold. Tell him the lavender is blooming. The lavender is blooming. A code phrase. My grandfather, the man who spent 40 years restoring a car and 40 years reading fraudulent balance sheets, had set up a code phrase, hidden behind his own workbench. In a garage that was supposed to hold a birthday surprise for a granddaughter he didn't live to surprise. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket, walked inside, sat at the kitchen table. Arthur's chair was empty at the head, the way it had been empty for 6 months, the way I suspected it would be empty for a long time. But for the first time since we buried him, I didn't feel like I was sitting in an empty house. I felt like I was sitting in the opening move of something Arthur had been building long before I knew the game had started. I looked at the phone number. Whoever Harold was, Arthur trusted him enough to leave his name in a place only I would find. Whatever the lavender is blooming meant, it was important enough to hide behind 40 years of tools and dust and careful, patient work. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. ICU nurses' hands are always steady, even when the rest of us is shaking apart. I dialed the number. I called Vanessa 7 more times that day. Every call went to voicemail. Her voice, bright and rehearsed, telling me to leave a message and have a blessed day. I didn't leave one. I stood at the kitchen window with the phone in my hand and watched the driveway and the open garage door I couldn't bring myself to close. The oil stain was visible on the concrete from here, dark and wide, holding the shape of something that used to matter to someone. I made coffee I didn't drink. I showered, changed out of my scrubs, and then put them back on because they felt like the only armor I owned. Just before 5, headlights swept across the driveway. A white Audi Q5 pulled in. I noticed the dealer plate frame still on the back. A lease. The kind of car you drive when you want people to think you've already made it but haven't bothered to commit to the payments. Mark parked in the exact spot where the Mustang used to sit. Not off to the side, not near the curb. Dead center on the driveway, right where the garage mouth meets the concrete, as though the car had never been there. As though he was already filling the space it left behind. A small thing, but it landed like a hand across my face. Vanessa got out from the passenger side. She didn't look at the garage. Her eyes went straight to the front door where she knew I'd be standing. Mark came around the car and placed his hand on the small of her back. Not guiding, steering, I've spent 10 years reading body language in the ICU, watching how families touch each other in waiting rooms, learning the difference between a hand that says, I'm here, and a hand that says, you're mine. Mark's hand was the second kind. I met them at the door, didn't speak, stepped aside and let them in. Evening heat still rose from the asphalt. Creosote drifted in from the desert. Vanessa trailed a perfume I didn't recognize as she passed me. Something floral and expensive, not the drugstore vanilla she'd worn since high school. Another thing that used to be hers and wasn't anymore. We sat at the kitchen table. Arthur's table, the one he built from reclaimed railroad oak the year I was born. 3 chairs occupied. His chair at the head sat empty. I hadn't moved it since the funeral. Some mornings I'd come home from a shift and catch it in my peripheral vision, and for half a heartbeat expect to see him there, reading glasses on his nose. Diamondback's mug steaming, looking up to say, "Rough night, kiddo?" Vanessa chose the chair closest to the hallway, escape route. I registered it the way I register a patient positioning themselves near the door before I deliver test results. Automatically, without trying. Mark didn't sit. He leaned against the counter and surveyed the kitchen the way a real estate appraiser surveys crown molding. His eyes moved from the window above the sink to the original tile backsplash to the archway into the living room. He was calculating, not admiring, pricing. I could feel it the way you feel a barometric shift before a storm. He was standing in my grandfather's kitchen running numbers in his head about what it was worth. His watch caught the overhead light. New, tastefully expensive, an Omega Seamaster or something near it. And his shoes. Italian leather, barely scuffed, the soles still sharp at the edges. These were not the possessions of a man who needed $28,000 from a 60-year-old car to fund a wedding deposit. These were the possessions of a man spending freely from a source he didn't intend to name. Something cold settled in my stomach and made itself at home. "Where is the car, Vanessa?" I kept my voice level, the same voice I use when telling a family that the next 24 hours are critical and I need them to hear me clearly. No panic, no accusation, just the question. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I can explain." "Where's the car?" "We needed the money for the wedding. Mark's been planning Dubai and the deposits were due and the car was just sitting there collecting dust. I thought Grandpa would have wanted us to use it for something that mattered." "How much?" She glanced at Mark. He gave a slight nod. "Permission." I watched that nod the way I watch a senior physician signal a resident across a patient's bed, small and practiced. It meant my sister needed her fiancé's approval before she could answer a simple question about money. 28,000. I let the number sit. $28,000. 40 years of Arthur's Saturdays. 40 years of sourcing parts from junkyards across 3 states. Hand-mixing paint until the red was exactly the shade of dark wine he saw in his head. Hand-stitching leather with patience most people can't even imagine. Sold for the price of a mid-range sedan. Mark spoke for the first time. "Chloe, I get it. The car was sentimental, but your grandfather's gone. Sentimentality doesn't pay bills. That Mustang was depreciating in your garage while it could have been working for this family's future." This family's future. The way he said it. Possessive. As though the ring on Vanessa's finger granted him equity in everything Arthur spent his life building. As though engagement was a merger, and he'd just acquired a controlling share. "Besides," Mark added, shifting against the counter, "Harold said the engine needed serious work. Transmission was slipping, wasn't worth much more than what we got for it." He stopped, caught himself, but not fast enough. "Harold?" I asked, quietly. The way I ask a patient how much they've really been drinking when the liver panel tells me the truth they won't. Mark's jaw tightened for half a second. Micro-expression. The kind I'm trained to catch at 3 a.m. when someone says they're fine while their vitals say they're dying. "The buyer, some mechanic over on McDowell." But I heard it. Mark said Harold's name before Vanessa did, before anyone mentioned a name. He already knew the buyer, he'd already spoken to the shop. He had researched the sale, identified the target, set the price, and handed the script to Vanessa to perform while I was 12 hours deep in a night shift at Phoenix General. This wasn't my sister's impulsive decision. This was Mark's operation executed through my sister's hands. I filed it away, said nothing. ICU training. When a patient's vitals shift, you don't announce it to the room. You assess, you document, you act when the time is right. I stood up, walked to the counter, picked up Arthur's restoration journal, the one I'd found that morning on the workbench, set it on the table in front of Vanessa, opened it to the last page. "Read it." She read. I watched her eyes move across the page, watched them slow at the final entry, the one Arthur wrote 7 weeks before the stroke. "Chloe's birthday next month. Surprise her. She's ready. 40 years and this old car still teaches me patience. Can't wait to see her face when she turns the key and hears that engine for the first time knowing it's hers. My girl, she'll understand what this car really—" It stopped mid-sentence. The pen trailed off into nothing. 3 weeks later, he collapsed at his desk. I held his hand in the ICU for 11 hours. A tear hit the journal page. Not mine. Vanessa's. It landed on the word patience, smudging ink that was already months old. For a moment, she wasn't the woman who sold the car. She was the little girl who fell asleep in the Mustang's back seat on road trips to Flagstaff, who called Arthur Papa Bear until she was 12, who sat on his lap while he read the Sunday paper and pretended to understand the box scores. That Vanessa was still in there. I could see her. Underneath 2 years of Mark's careful influence, she was still in there. But then Mark moved. We should go. His hand found Vanessa's shoulder, that steering grip. Chloe needs time. We'll talk when everyone's calmer. The wedding planning won't wait, babe. Vanessa stood, eyes wet, still on the journal. Chloe, Go. I didn't walk them to the door. I sat at the table and listened. Footsteps on tile, the front door opening, the Audi starting, the sound of the car backing out of the space where the Mustang used to live. Then nothing. Just the house and the silence and the empty chair and the journal with my sister's tear drying on our grandfather's last unfinished thought. The clock on the wall said 7:14. I'd been awake 31 hours. My body wanted sleep. My mind was running triage. I replayed everything. Mark knowing Harold's name, the watch, the lease Audi, the way he appraised the kitchen like inventory, the way Vanessa needed permission before she could say a number out loud. I sorted the details the way I sort patient data after a complicated admission, looking for the pattern that connects the symptoms to the disease. Then something surfaced, a detail from that morning I'd pushed aside in the shock of the empty garage. The driveway, fresh scratches on the concrete near the garage mouth. Trailer hitch marks. Deep ones. Someone had backed a flatbed into the driveway, loaded a 2,000-pound car, and hauled it out. You don't use a flatbed to deliver a running car to a mechanic 3 miles down McDowell Road. You drive it. The Mustang ran fine. Arthur had it tuned and running 2 months before the stroke. I remember the sound of that engine catching, the deep rumble shaking the garage walls, the wrenches rattling on their shadow boards. Someone brought a trailer, loaded the car while I was gone. And Mark knew my shift schedule. He'd asked about it at dinner 2 weeks ago, casual as small talk. So Chloe works nights, huh? That must be tough. I'd thought he was being polite. He was timing a heist. This was not impulsive. This was orchestrated. And the man who orchestrated it had just stood in my grandfather's kitchen wearing Italian shoes and told me that sentimentality doesn't pay bills. I walked back to the garage, worse at night. Just oil stain and shadows and the absence of a car that should have been mine. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket, Arthur's handwriting under the bare bulb, a phone number with a Scottsdale area code, and below it, in careful block letters, the code phrase I still didn't fully understand. Back in the kitchen. I dialed, 4 rings, then voicemail. You've reached Bennett Classic Restorations. Leave a message after the tone. I hung up, tried again. Same, left no message. A lifetime of night shifts taught me that the most important information travels in person, never through a recording. I made coffee, Arthur's Folgers, the red can he bought every 2 weeks for 40 years. The smell filled the kitchen like a visitation. I sat with it at the table and took stock of what I knew and what I didn't. I knew the car was gone. I knew Mark engineered the sale. I knew Arthur anticipated it. I didn't know why my grandfather hid a phone number behind his workbench, why he invented a code phrase, or what Harold Bennett had to do with any of it. But I knew this. Arthur Ramirez spent 40 years as a forensic accountant. He traced embezzled funds through shell companies. He testified in federal court 11 times. He once told me, "Numbers don't lie, sweetheart. People lie. Numbers just sit there and wait for someone smart enough to read them." Arthur didn't panic. Arthur prepared. And whatever he prepared was sitting in a restoration shop on McDowell Road waiting for me. I fell asleep on the couch sometime after midnight. Arthur's journal on my chest, his note in my pocket, the Folgers going cold on the table. At 6:15 the next morning, my phone rang. Unknown Scottsdale number. I answered on the first ring. "Miss Ramirez?" The voice was rough, weathered, the voice of a man who'd spent decades breathing paint thinner and motor oil. "My name is Harold Bennett. I own a restoration shop on McDowell Road. Your grandfather and I were close. I'm holding his car. And I need you to come here right now. Arthur left something inside the Mustang, something he wanted only you to find." I was already reaching for the keys to Arthur's truck. I took Arthur's truck. The F-250 he used to haul parts, bench seat cracked from decades of Arizona sun, the cab still holding his smell. Coffee, Old Spice, and something faintly sweet that was just Arthur. I drove east on McDowell Road through the industrial stretch where auto body shops and welding yards lined both sides. Morning light cut hard across the Sonoran, painting the Superstition Mountains pink and gold. The air through the cracked window tasted of dust and creosote. I passed a strip mall with a storefront I'd never noticed before. A sign in the window read, "New Beginnings Support Group, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Grief counseling." I clocked it without thinking, the way I clock an irregular number on a monitor that isn't alarming yet but doesn't feel right either. Something about that sign pricked the back of my mind. I didn't know why. I kept driving. Bennett Classic Restorations sat between a transmission shop and a concrete supplier. Desert stone building, sandstone block, flat roof, a hand-painted sign. Bennett Classic Restorations since 1989. Above the bay doors, a vintage Texaco star sign, rusted at the edges but still proud. The lot held a dozen cars in various states of resurrection. A Corvette Stingray missing its hood, a Plymouth Barracuda in primer gray, and in the far corner, under a canvas tarp staked against desert wind, a shape I'd have recognized from 100 yards. The long hood, the fast back slope. Even covered, the Mustang looked like it was about to run. I parked, breathed, the same breathing I do before walking into a room where the news is bad. The shop office door opened before I reached it. Harold Bennett, 62. Wiry and sun-darkened. Khaki coveralls with Harold stitched in red above the pocket. Silver buzz cut, marine sharp. Hands scarred from decades of metalwork. Eyes red-rimmed. He hadn't slept either. "Miss Ramirez." Working man's handshake. Firm, calloused, honest. "Thank you for coming this early. I wasn't sure you'd get my message." "You said my grandfather left something in the car." "I did." He held the door open and gestured toward the office. "But first, I need you to understand how I knew Arthur, and why he trusted me with this. Please, it's going to take a minute." The office was small, cluttered the way working offices get when the work matters more than the filing. Metal desk buried under invoices. A Mr. Coffee machine older than the building, the pot stained brown from years of service. Framed photographs on every wall, classic cars, before and after restoration shots, a few customer photos. One photo stopped me cold. Corner of the wall, slightly crooked in its frame. Arthur and Harold standing on a riverbank, fishing rods in hand, both laughing with their heads thrown back. Arthur looked 10 years younger. They were wearing matching caps that read, "World's Okayest Fisherman." I stared at it. This wasn't a business relationship. This was friendship. Deep, old, comfortable friendship. The kind built on matching hats and inside jokes and 20 years of Saturday mornings on a river. And I never knew it existed. "How long did you know my grandfather?" 23 years. 23 years. I visited Arthur every single week of my adult life. He never once mentioned Harold Bennett. He kept this friendship entirely separate, this whole corner of his life hidden. The man who told me everything about the Mustang's engine specs and the proper way to season a cast iron pan never said a word about the person he went fishing with for 2 decades. Harold poured coffee without asking, handed me a mug, black, no sugar, exactly how Arthur drank it. He sat down across from me and told me a story. 2001. Harold's wife, Ellen, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to the end. Insurance covered 80%, which sounds generous until you realize that 80% of catastrophic still leaves you underwater. Harold owed $112,000. The bank was circling the shop with a foreclosure notice. His life's work, 30 years of building a reputation one restored engine at a time, about to disappear under a rubber stamp. Arthur was a customer back then, had been bringing the Mustang in for specialty work, chrome plating, paint matching, parts that Harold tracked down from junkyards and swap meets across 3 states. They were friendly. Not close. Not yet. Then Arthur saw the foreclosure notice taped to Harold's front door. "He didn't offer me money," Harold said. His voice thickened the way voices do when the memory is heavier than the words can hold. That's not who Arthur was. He sat right where you're sitting and asked me 3 questions. How much do you owe? Who do you owe it to? And do you have 6 months of financial records? Arthur, forensic accountant, 40 years of reading numbers the way Harold read engines, sat in this office and went through Harold's books, spent 6 months restructuring the debt, negotiated with creditors, found billing errors in the hospital invoices that knocked $19,000 off the total, set up a payment plan Harold could survive on. Your grandfather didn't give me a fish, Chloe. He taught me how to fish. Saved my shop. Saved my life, if I'm being honest about it. Harold paused. His hands found the fishing photo on the shelf behind him, and he held it the way you hold something fragile that proves a thing you need to believe is real. Ellen was gone, and I was ready to follow her out the door. Arthur gave me a reason to keep the lights on. He set the photo down, carefully. After that, we fished together every other Saturday for 20 years, until he got too sick. The last time I saw him healthy, he looked at me across the boat and said, "Harold, I need you to do something for me, and you can't ask why until it's time." I set my coffee down. What did he ask you to do? Build a hidden compartment in the Mustang. The words sat in the air between us. Somewhere in the shop bays, a pneumatic wrench fired off 3 quick bursts. The coffee machine gurgled, normal sounds in a room where normal had just left. We walked across the lot, morning sun full and merciless, Arizona burning off every shadow. Harold stopped beside the tarped car and rested his hand on the canvas. Arthur drove the Mustang here himself 10 months before he died. Spent 3 hours with me. Told me things about your family, about Mark. His jaw tightened. I watched the muscle work beneath the weathered skin. He asked me to build a custom compartment behind the dashboard, deep enough for documents, sealed and invisible unless you know where to press. And he made me swear 2 things. If anyone ever tried to sell this car, I would buy it, no matter the price, and I would call you. Only me? Only you, he was very specific. Harold gripped the edge of the tarp, pulled it back slowly. The Mustang emerged like a held breath finally released. Candy apple red. Arthur's custom mix, deeper than factory, a burgundy undertone that shifted in the sun like dark wine held to light. Chrome bumpers throwing the desert back in clean white lines. Black leather interior through the window, every seam straight. Dashboard polished to a dark mirror. And hanging from the rear view a small linen bag with clumsy hand stitches along the edge. The smell reached me before I identified it. Lavender. It hit my chest like a fist made of memory. Arthur grew lavender in the backyard. Had for decades. Dried it on the kitchen windowsill. Sewed the sachets himself with stitches so crooked they made me laugh every single time. Keeps the leather from cracking, he'd say with a straight face. But I knew the real reason. Lavender was my grandmother Clara's favorite flower. She died when I was 4. Arthur kept the lavender alive for 40 years after, the way he kept the car alive, the way he kept us alive. Quietly, patiently, without being asked. The dried flower that fell from the journal in the garage. That was lavender. Everything Arthur left behind was threaded to the same root. I touched the hood, warm from the sun. I could feel him in the metal, in the paint he mixed, in the engine he rebuilt 1 bolt at a time across 4 decades. The car wasn't a car. It was Arthur's patience made physical. His love letter to everyone he'd ever protected, written in steel and chrome and time. He told me the code phrase, too, Harold said. The lavender is blooming. If you'd called and said that, I would have known Arthur sent you. I didn't say it. I didn't know what it meant. Didn't matter. I recognized your voice. A ghost of a smile. You sound just like him when you're angry. Harold opened the driver's door. Leather and lavender and old car rolled out of the cabin like something that had been waiting. I sat on the edge of the seat with my feet still on the ground. The way you sit beside a hospital bed when you're afraid of what comes next, but you sit down anyway because the person in that bed needs you there. Harold reached across me. His scarred fingers found something beneath the dashboard. A recessed latch invisible unless you knew exactly where to press. A soft click. The panel below the original AM radio swung open on custom hinges that Harold had machined himself. Behind it, a compartment about 8 inches deep and 12 wide, lined with dark felt. Inside, a manila folder 2 inches thick, the tab labeled in Arthur's handwriting. A sealed envelope on heavy cream paper with my name in his careful script. A small wooden box with a brass clasp, and a USB flash drive taped to the inside wall with black electrical tape. Harold stepped back from the car. He came here one last time, 8 days before the stroke, brought all of this, made me seal it up, made me promise. His voice cracked. Harold Bennett, former Marine, 30 years of working with metal and fire, a man whose hands could rebuild a transmission in the dark, stood in his own parking lot with tears cutting lines through the dust on his face. He cried that day, Chloe. Sat right where you're sitting and cried. I'd known your grandfather 23 years. Strong man, proud man, never saw him cry until that afternoon. Harold swallowed, looked at the ground, then looked at me. He said, I can't tell them, Harold. If I tell Chloe, she'll confront him and he'll disappear. If I tell Vanessa, she won't believe me and I'll lose her. So I have to hide it. I have to put the truth inside the car and trust that the car will bring it to her when the time comes. Harold walked away, his boots crunched on the gravel. I'll be in Bay 2, coffee's on, take whatever time you need. A bay door clanged open. Pneumatic tools hissed. The sounds of a working shop filled the air around me while I sat in a 1966 Mustang, with a hidden compartment full of my dead grandfather's secrets, and the lavender swinging on the rear-view mirror like a slow, quiet heartbeat. I reached for the sealed envelope first, heavy in my hand, my name in Arthur's handwriting, the same handwriting that labeled my lunch boxes, that signed my report cards, that wrote "Proud of you, kiddo" on the card the day I passed my nursing boards. I broke the seal, 3 folded pages, a letter dated March 14th, 7 weeks before the stroke that killed him. I read the first line. My dear Chloe, if you're reading this, then the car is gone. Harold kept his promise, and the man your sister is marrying is not who he says he is. His real name is Derek Hale. The name hit me the way a flatline alarm hits at 3 in the morning, the kind that makes your hands move before your brain catches up. Derek Hale. I looked at the manila folder still in the compartment. The tab, in Arthur's precise handwriting, read, Derek Hale / Mark Dalton evidence. My grandfather built a case against my sister's fiancé, in secret, while dying, and he hid it inside a car because he knew someone would try to sell it. He knew Harold would catch it, and he knew the truth would find its way to me. I pulled the folder into my lap. My hands were steady. ICU nurses' hands are always steady. I opened it. The leather was warm from the sun. The lavender sachet turned slowly on the rearview mirror. Through the windshield, Harold's shop lot baked under a sky so blue it looked manufactured. Somewhere in Bay 2, an angle grinder hummed and sparked against metal. I sat in the driver's seat of my grandfather's Mustang with his letter in my hands and read the words that would rearrange everything I thought I knew about my family. My dear Chloe, if you're reading this, then the car is gone. Harold kept his promise, and the man your sister is marrying is not who he says he is. His real name is Derek Hale. Born Reno, Nevada, 1989. He has used at least 3 other names that I know of. Jason Moore, Tyler Bennett, Mark Dalton. There may be more. I stopped, read it again. Derek Hale. The name meant nothing to me, but it meant everything to the man who wrote it. He is a professional predator. He targets women, usually divorced or recently bereaved, through support groups, church events, and dating platforms. He studies them for months before making contact. He learns their routines, their vulnerabilities, their family finances. Then he engineers a chance meeting that feels like fate. My mind snapped to a memory I hadn't examined in months. Vanessa telling me how she met Mark, her face lit up like I hadn't seen it since Arthur's diagnosis. The sweetest thing, Chloe, he was at the same grief counseling group after Papa got sick. He lost his mother, too. What are the odds? I'd thought it was beautiful. Two broken people finding each other through shared loss. I'd smiled. I'd been happy for her. The grief counseling center sign I'd passed on McDowell Road an hour ago burned behind my eyes. That sign wasn't a coincidence. Nothing about Mark was a coincidence. He didn't stumble into my sister's grief group. He researched her, found her there, sat down beside her and performed sorrow like a man who'd rehearsed it in the mirror. My stomach turned. I forced my eyes back to the page. His method is consistent. He marries quickly, usually within 6 to 8 months. He isolates the spouse from family. He identifies the financial assets, property, savings, retirement, inheritance. Then he builds access, joint accounts, co-ownership documents, power of attorney. Once he has legal control, he liquidates everything and disappears. Arthur's handwriting was steady in this section. Precise. No emotion in the pen strokes. He was laying out facts the way he'd laid out forensic audits for 40 years, the way he testified in federal court 11 times in the same gray suit. But I knew my grandfather. I could read the control behind the precision. He was furious, and he was terrified. I became suspicious 11 months ago. Vanessa pulling away. Canceled Sunday dinners, financial changes. I glimpsed credit card statements when she left her purse at the house. New charges that didn't match her salary. Classic isolation tactics. I've seen them before. Then the letter shifted. The handwriting changed. Not shakier exactly, but smaller, more careful. As though what came next cost him something to write. I was swindled once, Chloe. 1987. A business partner named Ray Geller took $80,000 from me through a phony investment scheme. I never told you or Vanessa. I was ashamed. But that experience gave me something valuable. I learned what a con man smells like. The charm that's a little too perfect. The stories that don't quite add up. The way they watch you when they think you're not looking, measuring what you're worth. Mark has that smell. I recognized it the first time I shook his hand. I set the letter down. $80,000. In 1987, that was everything. Arthur never mentioned it, never showed bitterness. Just kept going, kept raising 2 granddaughters, kept restoring the car on Saturday mornings, kept living a modest, patient life while carrying the scar of a betrayal he was too ashamed to name. The man absorbed a catastrophic loss and turned it into radar. The letter continued, the final section. I hired a private investigator, Nina Salazar, former FBI Financial Crimes Division, 22 years. She confirmed everything within 3 weeks. Derek Hale has left a trail across Nevada, Florida, and now Arizona. At least 3 confirmed victims. 2 pending civil suits that went nowhere because he vanished before prosecution. Nina's contact information is in the folder. She is paid through the end of this year. She knows everything. Call her first. I folded the letter, set it on the passenger seat, opened the manila folder. 2 inches thick. Organized with the precision of a man who built cases that convicted embezzlers. 5 tabbed sections. I flipped through them the way I flip through a patient's chart when I'm looking for the thing that explains why the numbers don't make sense. Tab 1. Identity. A Nevada DMV photo. The face was unmistakably Mark. Driver's license under Derek Hale. Birth certificate copy. 2 legal name changes. Hale to Moore in 2016. Moore to Dalton in 2020. A man who changed his name the way other people changed addresses. Tab 2. Victims. Diane Kowalski, Reno, Nevada. Married Jason Moore in 2017. Divorced 2018. Lost $340,000 through fabricated joint investment accounts. Margaret Chen, Tampa, Florida. Married Tyler Bennett in 2019. Lost $285,000. There was a photocopy of a hospital intake form. Margaret Chen. Admitted for intentional overdose. The clinical language was familiar to me, the kind of language I read every week in the ICU. Patient states she has nothing left. I've held the hands of patients like Margaret. I've watched monitors and prayed for the line to keep moving. Now I was looking at a woman who nearly died because of the man my sister was planning to marry in Dubai in 3 weeks. Tab 3. Financial. A spreadsheet in Arthur's handwriting mapping Mark's money trail. Shell LLC's wire transfers. Account closures timed to match each divorce. Margins filled with notes. Assets drained within 3 to 6 months of gaining legal access. Funds routed through intermediary accounts before reaching offshore destination. Tab 4. Current threat. Arthur's handwritten timeline. Mark began discussing financial consolidation with Vanessa in January, suggested co-ownership of the house, mentioned simplifying the trust. These are preparatory moves. If Vanessa signs power of attorney, Mark gains legal access to the house, the savings, everything. Red ink at the bottom. Total exposure, approximately $800,000. Everything Arthur spent a lifetime building. I pulled the USB drive from the compartment, walked across the lot to Harold's office. He looked up from a carburetor he was cleaning, saw my face, and said nothing. Just pushed his laptop across the desk and went back to the carburetor. Some men know when words are wrong for the moment. I plugged in the drive, one file, video, titled, "For Chloe." I pressed play. Arthur appeared on screen. Webcam footage, grainy, slightly blown out from the desk lamp. His home office desk, the one I knew. Oak surface, green banker's lamp, Clara's framed photo. He looked thinner than I remembered. Gaunt, reading glasses. The flannel shirt I gave him 2 Christmases ago. He cleared his throat, looked directly into the camera. "Chloe, if you're watching this, then I didn't make it. And someone sold the car, and Harold did what I asked." His voice was steady. Accountant's voice, but his hands, folded on the desk, trembled slightly. I saw it because I'm trained to see it. "I want you to know I tried to tell Vanessa, 3 months ago. I sat her down and showed her everything. She got angry." His voice broke. He took off his glasses, wiped his eyes. "She said I was paranoid. She said I was jealous of Mark, that I couldn't stand seeing her happy. She said I was losing it, getting old, seeing things that weren't there." He put the glasses back on, steadied himself. "Maybe she's right about the old part, but I'm not wrong about this man. 40 years of reading financial fraud, Chloe. I know what embezzlement looks like at the penny level. I know what asset theft looks like dressed up as love." Arthur leaned closer to the camera. His eyes, the same brown as mine, the same brown as Clara's, filled the frame. "So I did the only thing I could. I gathered the evidence. I hired Nina. I hid it all in the one place I knew would reach you. Because I know you, kiddo. You're the one who paid attention. You're the one who sat in the garage and handed me wrenches and asked questions about torque specifications when you were 12 years old. You're the one who will fight." He paused. The desk lamp hummed. Somewhere in the house behind him, a clock ticked. "And Chloe, save Lucille too. He's already started on her." Lucille, Mrs. Lucille Harmon, 78 years old. The widow next door who baked lemon bars for every block party and owned 4 laundromats her husband Frank built from nothing. Mark was targeting her too, running 2 schemes in parallel. My family and a lonely old woman whose only protection had been Arthur. Arthur's voice hardened. "I found out Mark's been visiting Lucille, offering free financial advice for seniors. He brought a brochure from a company that doesn't exist. He's setting her up the same way. Gain trust, gain access, drain everything. Lucille has no children, no family nearby, no one watching out for her except me." He stopped, looked down at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter. "I'm running out of time. I can feel it. Something's wrong with me, headaches, dizzy spells. I haven't told anyone. I'm afraid if I go to the doctor, they'll find something that takes me off the board before I finish this." I pressed pause. My chest was so tight I couldn't breathe. He knew. Arthur knew something was wrong, the warning signs of the stroke that would kill him. And he chose to keep working instead of seeking help. He chose the investigation over his own survival. He chose us. I pressed play for the final 30 seconds. "Everything you need is in the folder. The bonds and certificates are in a safe deposit box. Keys in the wooden box. Call Nina first. Call Patricia Whitfield second. She's a lawyer. She'll represent you. And Chloe," his voice softened, "don't hate your sister. Vanessa is a victim too. She just doesn't know it yet." He smiled. The real smile. The one that crinkled the corners of his eyes the way it did when I was 6, and he pushed me on the tire swing in the backyard and I screamed higher, higher, and he always pushed me higher. "I love you, kiddo. I always believed in you. Now go prove me right." The screen went black. Arthur's face, the reading glasses, the flannel shirt, the half-second of that real smile at the very end, lingered in the room like warmth after a fire goes out. Harold appeared in the doorway, saw my face, said nothing, set a fresh coffee on the desk and walked away. I wiped my face, drank the coffee. It was terrible, burnt and bitter, and it was exactly what I needed. Something real, something that tasted like the world outside this nightmare. I went back to the folder, flipped to a section I'd skimmed past. Tab 5, labeled Surveillance. Photos printed on glossy paper, date-stamped. Mark at a coffee shop in Tempe, sitting across from a blonde woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, professional clothes, his hand on hers. Not the body language of a business meeting. More photos. Same woman at a bank lobby. Outside an attorney's office. In a parking lot exchanging a folder. Not a victim. An equal. A partner. I flipped to the last photo in the stack. This one was different. Not a coffee shop or a bank. A residential street. My street. The photo showed Mark walking up the front path of the house next door to Arthur's. Lucille Harmon's house. He was carrying a gift bag and wearing that smile, the one I now understood was a lockpick, not an expression. The date stamp stopped me cold. 3 weeks before Arthur's stroke. Mark was already inside Lucille's house while planning a wedding with Vanessa, while running up credit cards in my sister's name, while Arthur was dying and hiding evidence in a car he would never drive again. I closed the folder, stood, walked to the window. The Mustang sat in the lot, red paint blazing in the afternoon sun. "You didn't just leave me a car, did you, Papa?" I whispered. "You left me a war." I pulled out my phone, dialed the first number from Arthur's contact list. Nina Salazar answered on the second ring. "Chloe Ramirez, I've been expecting your call for 6 months." Nina Salazar's voice was clipped, professional, the kind of voice that had conducted 300 depositions and didn't waste a syllable on small talk. I was sitting in the passenger seat of Arthur's F-250 in Harold's parking lot, with the folder on my lap, and the USB drive in my pocket, and my grandfather's voice still ringing in my ears. Nina Salazar had been waiting for me the way Harold had been waiting for me, the way the compartment had been waiting for me. Arthur built a network of people who would activate when the car was sold, a dead man's security system, triggered by betrayal. "He hired me 10 months before he died," Nina said. "Former FBI Financial Crimes Division, 22 years, now private. Your grandfather found me through a mutual colleague and briefed me on everything. He paid my retainer through December of this year." She paused, and when she spoke again, the professional edge softened by a fraction. He said, "If I don't make it, Chloe will find you eventually. Be ready." So I've been ready. "What do you have?" "Everything, but first you need to hear this." Nina's voice dropped. "Do you know how Mark met your sister?" I knew the story. Vanessa told me over dinner, glowing, the happiest I'd seen her since Arthur's diagnosis. The grief counseling group, the Wednesday meetings where she went to process her anticipatory grief over losing our grandfather. Mark was there too, lost his mother. 2 broken hearts finding each other in a church basement. "His mother is alive," Nina said. Flat, no inflection. A fact delivered the way a pathologist delivers autopsy results. "She lives in a nursing home in Sparks, Nevada. Hasn't seen her son in 7 years. He joined that grief group to find your sister. He researched Vanessa for at least 2 months before making contact. Her social media, her work schedule, her relationship to Arthur, the estimated value of Arthur's estate. He was shopping for a target and your sister fit the profile." The grief counseling sign on McDowell Road flashed behind my eyes. I'd driven past it 2 hours ago, and something had pricked at me. Something I couldn't name. Now I could name it. Mark didn't stumble into Vanessa's grief. He hunted her inside it. Nina shifted to operational mode, fast, dense. The military briefing energy of a woman who had spent 2 decades building cases against people who stole from the vulnerable. The marriage license was filed. Wedding in Dubai in 21 days. After the wedding, Mark would push Vanessa to sign co-ownership papers on Arthur's house and a general power of attorney. If he secured POA, he could access savings, refinance the house, liquidate Arthur's trust share, all legally, all through Vanessa's signature. Arthur had moved 60% of the trust into an irrevocable trust in my name alone. Mark couldn't touch that. But the house, the savings, Vanessa's share of the estate, all of it was still exposed. Total at risk, roughly $530,000. Arthur was the most thorough client I've ever had, Nina said. He left you everything you need, but we have a clock, 21 days. I hung up, sat in the truck for 30 seconds doing the breathing I do before a difficult procedure. Then I drove to Wells Fargo on Camelback Road. The wooden box from the Mustang compartment sat on the passenger seat. Arthur made it himself, hand-carved, brass clasp. Inside, a brass key and a slip of paper. Box 814. Go today, don't wait. The bank lobby was granite and recirculated air, and the hushed sound of money being handled by people paid to be careful. A branch manager named David Orozco met me. Early 50s, wireframe glasses, kind eyes. Miss Ramirez, your grandfather told me you'd come eventually. Another person Arthur prepared. Another piece of the net he wove in secret while the rest of us thought he was just a retired accountant, tending his garden and restoring his car. Orozco led me to the vault, fluorescent lights, metal boxes in rows, the door sealing behind us with a pressurized click. Box 814. 2 keys turned. The box slid free. Inside, stock certificates, Vanguard Index Fund shares purchased in small amounts every quarter for 12 years. Arthur's note clipped to the top. Started in 2012. Current estimated value $220,000. These are in the irrevocable trust. Derek Hale cannot touch them. $220,000. 12 years of quiet, patient investing. Arthur lived modestly, drove an old truck, wore the same flannel shirts until the elbows thinned. He wasn't poor. He was building a fortress, and he didn't want anyone to see the walls going up. A second sealed envelope. Heavy. For Vanessa. Give her this when she's ready. I held it up to the light. Couldn't see through. Whatever was inside, Arthur wanted it delivered at the right moment. Not now, not yet. I put it in my bag and trusted my grandfather's timing. A laminated card with 3 phone numbers, Diane Kowalski, Margaret Chen, Patricia Whitfield, and Arthur's final note. These women lost everything to the same man. They agreed to help. Call them. They're waiting. I transferred the certificates to a new box in my name alone. Then I sat in the truck in the bank parking lot and made the calls. Diane Kowalski picked up on the 3rd ring. Reno, Nevada. Her voice was cautious, guarded, the voice of someone who'd been taught the hard way not to trust phone calls. Mrs. Kowalski, my name is Chloe Ramirez. My grandfather Arthur gave me your number. A long pause. Arthur Ramirez, the accountant from Phoenix. Her voice softened. Is he with you? He passed away 6 months ago. Oh, honey. Diane exhaled, a sound that carried years of damage. He was good people. Called me over a year ago. Said he was investigating a man who'd targeted his family. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Diane met Jason Moore at a church potluck in Reno in 2016. Recently divorced. 2 grown kids. Jason was charming, attentive, made her feel visible for the first time since the divorce. They married in 5 months. 6 months later, Jason suggested consolidating their finances. Joint accounts, a friend with a private equity fund, guaranteed returns. $340,000, my retirement, my share of the house from the divorce, my mother's life insurance, all of it gone through shell companies I didn't know existed. Jason vanished when a credit card got declined at a grocery store. Divorce papers arrived from a Las Vegas P.O. box 6 weeks later. But the money wasn't the worst part. My daughter Rachel blamed me, said I was reckless, said I threw away her inheritance. She didn't speak to me for 2 years, Chloe, 2 years of silence. That man didn't just rob me. He destroyed the trust between me and my own child. I gripped the steering wheel. The parallel hit my chest like a closed fist. Mark was doing the same thing, using Vanessa to fracture a family, weaponizing trust, turning blood against blood. Arthur asked if I'd testify, Diane said. I told him anywhere, anytime. That offer stands for you, sweetheart. You need me in Arizona, I'm on the next flight. I thanked her, hung up, sat for a minute watching the Phoenix traffic crawl past the bank parking lot. Then I dialed the second number. Margaret Chen answered on the fifth ring. Tampa, Florida. Her voice was quiet, careful, each word measured. The voice of someone who had survived something that nearly killed her and was still negotiating the terms of living afterward. I recognized that voice. I've heard it in the ICU at 4 a.m. from patients who made it through the night and aren't sure yet if they're glad. Margaret married Tyler Bennett in 2019. Pandemic wedding, small. No family present because of lockdown restrictions. Tyler was patient, kind, a perfect husband for a full year before he mentioned money. He waited 12 months. That's how patient these people are. Tyler convinced Margaret that her elderly mother's finances needed restructuring, sold Margaret's late father's auto repair business to a shell company Tyler controlled. $285,000 gone. He took a photo of me sleeping once. Margaret's voice went flat. I found it on his phone later, in a folder labeled Documentation. He was photographing me in vulnerable moments, building a file in case he ever needed to argue I was mentally unfit. She paused. I heard her breathe. The parking lot was silent around me except for the tick of the engine cooling. After he vanished, after I understood what happened, I swallowed a bottle of Ambien. My son Ethan found me on the bathroom floor, 3 weeks in the hospital, psych hold. I sat with it. Didn't speak. Held the phone the way I hold a patient's hand when there are no words that help, and presence is the only medicine left. I'm alive because my son got home early from work, Margaret said. A traffic jam saved my life. That's the margin. That's how close he got me. She paused again. Then, steadier. Arthur gave me something no one else could. The knowledge that I wasn't stupid wasn't reckless. I was targeted by a professional. Knowing that doesn't bring the money back, but it gave me back my dignity. Will you testify? Honey, I've been rehearsing what I'll say in that courtroom for 14 months. I hung up, pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, breathed, 2 women, 2 shattered lives, and the same man, wearing a different name each time, walking into the next family with his hands clean and his smile loaded. I dialed the third number. Patricia Whitfield, elder fraud attorney, Phoenix. Patricia was fast-talking, sharp, no nonsense. The kind of lawyer who drinks black coffee during depositions and makes opposing counsel sweat through their collars. Arthur Ramirez briefed me 18 months ago. I've been reviewing Nina's file every 2 weeks. I'll represent you and your sister pro bono. Pro bono? Arthur helped my mother navigate Medicare paperwork for 3 years. Wouldn't take a dime. Said neighbors help neighbors. Consider this returning the favor through his granddaughter. Patricia laid out the legal landscape. Criminal charges needed law enforcement. Nina's evidence was strong but required formal presentation. Detective Ray Castillo at Phoenix PD Financial Crimes was the right contact. Patricia knew him. Civil fraud suits could run simultaneously. Multiple victims strengthened the case enormously. But the critical gap, they needed Mark to demonstrate current intent on record. The folder proved identity and pattern. A defense attorney could argue rehabilitation. They needed Mark to reveal his active plan, documented, admissible. We need him comfortable enough to talk, to pitch, to lay out exactly what he wants Vanessa to sign and why, and we need it on camera. Then Patricia added something that made my stomach drop. Nina flagged something this morning. Mark opened 2 LLCs last month, both registered under Vanessa's name. Vanessa didn't sign the incorporation papers, he forged her signature. That's a felony on its own. But more importantly, it tells us he's already moving. He's not waiting for the wedding. He's building the financial infrastructure right now. 2 shell companies. My sister's name forged on documents she'd never seen. Mark wasn't planning anymore. He was executing. I drove home. The desert scrolled past, saguaro and creosote and red dust. Arthur's house waited at the end of the street. The empty garage. The oil stain shaped like a cracked heart. I pulled into the driveway, checked my phone, a new message from Nina, a file attachment, and 4 words. Check your sister's credit. I opened the attachment. A credit report. Vanessa Ramirez. 3 credit cards I'd never heard of, all opened in the last 14 months. Total balance, $54,000. Charges, restaurants, hotels, flights, a $12,000 Dubai venue deposit, and an $8,000 payment to Pinnacle Financial Advisory LLC. Pinnacle Financial Advisory, one of the 2 LLCs Mark forged under Vanessa's name. He was charging expenses to his own fake company through my sister's credit. A second message from Nina. He's also started visiting Lucille Harmon, free financial advice for seniors. He's running 2 schemes at once. We need to move on Lucille before she signs anything. I stared at the phone. 2 fronts, 21 days. And my sister didn't know any of it. 37 steps from Arthur's front porch to Lucille's. I've counted them since I was 8 years old, running back and forth between the 2 houses carrying lemon bars in one direction and tomatoes from Arthur's garden in the other. 2 houses. 2 families braided together for 30 years by the kind of friendship that doesn't need explaining because it's built into the foundation of every day. Arthur and Frank arguing about the Diamondbacks over the fence on summer evenings while the grill smoked and the sprinklers hissed. Clara and Lucille sitting on Lucille's porch with iced tea, laughing at their husbands, planning potlucks, sharing recipes that neither of them followed exactly because that's not how recipes work between friends. 4 people who made a neighborhood feel like a country. Now only Lucille was left, and the man who was trying to destroy what remained of my family was already inside her house. Lucille's place was a single-story Arizona ranch with a terracotta roof faded to salmon by decades of sun. Desert landscaping done right, golden barrel cactus in neat rows, a palo verde tree throwing dappled shade. By the front door, a clay pot of lavender that Lucille and Arthur planted together the year Clara died. The lavender was blooming. It was always blooming. Butterscotch sat on the porch railing, 15 years old, arthritic, still carrying himself like he owned the zip code. I scratched behind his ears. He purred and closed his eyes. This cat had known me since I was 19. Lucille opened the door before I knocked. 78, 5'2", sharp-eyed behind bifocals, silver hair in a careful bun. Flour dusted her apron. Baking day. The smell of lemon and butter rolled out of the house like a warm hand reaching for me. Chloe Marie Ramirez, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. She pulled me into a hug that was surprisingly strong for a woman her size. You look like you haven't slept. Come in. I made bars. I stepped inside and the house wrapped around me the way it always had. Lemon cleaner, lavender, flour, the faintest trace of Bengay. Photographs covered every surface. Frank Harmon, square-jawed and kind-eyed, the man who built 4 laundromats from a single broken washing machine he fixed in his garage in 1971. Frank and Lucille at their wedding, Frank and Arthur fishing, Clara and Lucille laughing with arms linked at a barbecue while their husbands argued about something that didn't matter and mattered completely. I sat at Lucille's kitchen table and I didn't rush it. Drank the coffee she poured, ate a lemon bar still warm from the rack, asked about her hip, her garden, Butterscotch's vet visit. I built the conversation the way I build rapport with frightened patients, gently, letting them lead, earning the right to say the hard thing by showing up for the easy things first. Then, carefully, Lucille, has anyone new been coming by lately? Anyone offering to help with finances or paperwork? Her face brightened. Oh, you mean Mark. Such a nice young man. Vanessa's fiancé. He's been so thoughtful. My stomach contracted, but my expression stayed level. Tell me about his visits. Lucille told me everything. She had no idea what she was describing. Mark first came 3 months ago. Said he was getting to know the neighborhood since he'd be family soon. Brought flowers. Complimented the house. Asked about Frank. Listened to Lucille's stories about Frank building the business from nothing. Second visit he brought pastries. Mentioned he was a financial consultant. Offered to look over her insurance policies. Just to make sure you're not overpaying. Third visit he reviewed the paperwork. Suggested her portfolio was underperforming. Fourth visit he brought a brochure. Lucille handed it to me across the table. Glossy paper, professional printing, stock photos of smiling seniors. Pinnacle Financial Advisory, a toll-free number, A website. I recognized the name before my fingers finished unfolding it. Pinnacle Financial Advisory. The same LLC mark forged under Vanessa's name. The same phantom company that charged $8,000 to my sister's credit card for services that didn't exist. The phone number went to a burner. The website was a template with stock photos and fabricated testimonials. I knew this because Nina had traced every thread of it 2 days ago. I was holding a hunting weapon designed to look like a helping hand. But to Lucille, sitting across from me with flour on her apron and trust in her eyes, it looked real. It looked like safety. It looked like a kind young man helping a widow manage her late husband's legacy. And that was the cruelest part. Mark didn't just steal money. He stole the feeling of being cared for. He made loneliness feel like it was ending, and then he made it permanent. He said I should simplify my holdings, Lucille continued. Move everything under one umbrella. He has a meeting set up for me next Thursday to sign some papers that will streamline my accounts. Sign some papers, next Thursday, 11 days from now. I set my coffee down. This was the moment. I'd rehearsed it on the walk over, standing on the sidewalk between the two houses, trying to find the words to tell a 78-year-old woman who trusted the world that the world had sent a predator to her door. Lucille, I need to tell you something about Mark, and it's going to be hard to hear. I started small, factual, the way I deliver devastating news in the ICU. Clear, compassionate, no euphemism. Mark's real name is Derek Hale. He's used at least 3 other names. He targets women, usually widows or recently divorced, and gains access to their finances through trust and charm. I let that land. Then, Grandpa Arthur found out 11 months ago. He hired an investigator. He gathered evidence. My voice caught. He told me to protect you too. Lucille set the spoon down. Her hands trembled, not frailty, the effort of holding herself together. Arthur knew? He left instructions in the Mustang. He said Mark was already targeting you. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. Butterscotch shifted on his chair. Outside, a mourning dove called from the Palo Verde. Arthur used to do my taxes, Lucille said finally. Her voice was thick. Every April for 15 years. Sat right there. She pointed to the chair across from me. Reading glasses and calculator and his Folgers. Never charged me a penny. I'd offer and he'd say, Lucille, Frank would haunt me if I took your money. She looked up. Eyes wet but fierce behind the bifocals. He was protecting me even then, wasn't he? Making sure my numbers were right. Making sure nobody could trick me. Yes, he was. And now he's gone. And that man, her voice hardened into something I'd never heard from Lucille Harmon. That man walked into my house with flowers and used Arthur's death as his entry. The realization settled on her. Mark came because Arthur was dead, because the watchdog was gone, because the one person who would have recognized the con was no longer alive to stop it. Except Arthur had planned for that too. Lucille wiped her eyes with a cloth napkin embroidered with Frank's initials, straightened, looked at me with a clarity that belonged to a woman who had survived every hard thing life threw at her for 78 years. What do you need me to do? I'd expected tears, collapse, maybe denial. Instead, Lucille Harmon sat across from me with the bearing of a general. The meeting next Thursday. Can you keep it? Act normal. Let Mark think everything's on track. You want me to play along? If you're willing. We need Mark to present his plan in a controlled setting, on the record. Your meeting could be part of that. Lucille nodded. Then her expression shifted. Something surfacing from memory. Chloe, there's something else. On his 3rd visit, when he looked at my insurance, Mark asked if I had any children. Grandchildren. Anyone who might have opinions about my finances. What did you say? I told him no. Frank and I couldn't have children. Foster kids are grown and scattered. She paused. When I said no, he smiled. Not a normal smile, a satisfied smile, like I'd given him exactly the answer he wanted. The detail was precise and chilling. Mark was checking for obstacles, checking whether anyone would notice, question, fight. Lucille told him she was alone, and he smiled because it meant she was unprotected. Except she wasn't. Arthur made sure of that. A knock at the front door. Rosa Gutierrez. My best friend, fellow ICU nurse, built like a point guard, voice that could cut through a code alarm at 50 yards. She was carrying 2 bags of groceries and wearing the expression of a woman who had been briefed and had already formed strong opinions. "Nina called me," Rosa said, stepping inside without waiting. "Said you needed backup. I brought chicken soup and my winning personality." She saw Lucille's face and shifted instantly, the way ICU nurses do, reading the room, matching the need. Crossed to the table, took Lucille's hand. "You're not alone in this, Mrs. Harmon, not for 1 second." Lucille's chin trembled. Then she squeezed Rosa's hand. "Well, you'd better sit down then. There's bars and I'll put more coffee on." Rosa sat with Lucille while I stepped onto the porch to call Nina. Through the screen door I heard Rosa asking about the lemon bars, laughing at something Lucille said about Frank's attempts at cooking. Rosa did what she always did, made people feel seen. Her laugh filled Lucille's house the way Arthur's used to fill the house next door. Nina answered on the first ring. I told her about Thursday, Lucille's cooperation, the brochure. Nina listened. Then, I ran the brochure's phone number. Burner, same Walmart in Tempe 3 months ago. Website is a template on a cheap server, and the domain is registered under the name Frank Harmon. I went still. Frank Harmon, Lucille's dead husband. The man who worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years building something real with his hands. Mark registered his fake financial company using that man's name, using the name that was carved into a headstone in a cemetery 7 miles from here, the name Lucille still whispered to the empty side of her bed at night. He was wearing Frank's name like a costume while picking Frank's wife's pockets. The audacity wasn't just criminal, it was cruelty dressed up as paperwork. What are the papers he wants her to sign? Property transfer agreement disguised as an investment consolidation form. If Lucille signs, she transfers ownership of all 4 laundromats to Pinnacle Financial Advisory, LLC, registered under Vanessa's forged name but controlled by Mark. Estimated value of the chain, $620,000. $620,000 plus $530,000 exposed in my family. Over $1 million across 2 targets simultaneously. Total picture, Nina. Past theft across victims, approximately $1.8 million. Current exposure, your family plus Lucille, approximately $1.15 million. If he succeeds, Derek Hale's lifetime take approaches $3 million. $3 million, built on smiles and patience and the systematic destruction of trust. The surveillance photos from Arthur's folder, Nina added. The blonde woman with Mark at the coffee shops and the bank. I'm close. She appears in 2 prior case files under different names. Should have a name by tomorrow. I hung up, stepped back inside. Rosa had a notebook open and was writing while Lucille dictated. "We're making a list," Rosa said. "Every visit, every question he asked, every document he touched. Lucille remembers everything." Lucille pushed the notebook toward me. Neat handwriting. Dates. Times, topics discussed. A complete log of Mark's 4 visits. A 78-year-old woman's meticulous memory, sharper than Mark ever imagined. "Arthur taught me to keep records," Lucille said quietly. "I just didn't know what I was keeping them for until now." I looked at the notebook, then at Lucille, then at Rosa. 3 women in a kitchen with lemon bars cooling on the counter, and a cat purring in the window, and a dead man's instructions folded in my pocket. We were not an army. We were a nurse, a widow, and another nurse. But we were what Arthur left behind, and he never built anything that couldn't hold weight. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message. "Stop digging. You don't know who you're dealing with." The desert evening went cold around me. Through the screen door, I could see Arthur's house, the open garage, the empty space where the Mustang should have been. Whoever sent that message thought they were threatening a woman alone. They were wrong about every part of that sentence. But the clock had just accelerated, and somewhere out there, Mark knew someone was coming. I stared at the text. 6 words, no punctuation, unknown number. "Stop digging. You don't know who you're dealing with." ICU training. When a code alarm sounds, you don't freeze. You move. You assess. You act. I screenshotted the message, forwarded it to Nina. Texted Patricia. Received anonymous threat, advising. Then I put the phone in my pocket, walked back inside Lucille's kitchen, and finished my coffee with a steady hand. Everything okay? Rosa asked. Fine, just Nina with an update. I didn't tell Lucille about the text. Not tonight. Not here, where the lemon bars were cooling and butterscotch was purring, and for one brief moment the world smelled like it used to smell when Arthur was alive. I walked the 37 steps home. The desert night had dropped cold, the way Arizona does after sundown, heat draining from the earth like a held breath finally released. Stars visible. Coyotes yipping somewhere in the wash behind the neighborhood. Familiar sounds, almost comforting, but tonight every shadow had edges. I locked Arthur's front door, checked the windows, checked the garage, still empty, still smelling of oil and absence. Set the alarm system Arthur installed 3 years ago that I'd never bothered to use until now. My phone buzzed. Nina. Traced the text. Burner phone. Purchased at the same Walmart in Tempe as the Pinnacle phone. Same date, same buyer. Whoever sent it has access to Mark's operation or is Mark. Same Walmart. Same purchase date. Mark bought 2 burner phones 3 months ago. One for the Pinnacle scam, one for threatening anyone who got too close. He'd planned for resistance. He'd planned for me. Or, the thought pricked at me, someone else bought both phones. The blonde woman from Arthur's surveillance photos. Someone I hadn't identified yet. I cataloged the threat the way I catalog a patient's symptoms. I'm a nurse who has worked ICU nights in a city where gunshot victims arrive at 3 a.m. I've been screamed at by patients in psychosis, grabbed by disoriented post-surgical patients, threatened by family members drowning in grief. An anonymous text was not going to stop me. But it told me something critical. Mark knew someone was investigating. The timeline had just compressed. 7 the next morning. 4 hours of sleep. ICU survival mode. Coffee. Arthur's Folgers. The red can. I poured it into the mug he gave me the day I graduated nursing school. Faded gold lettering that read, "Number 1 Nurse." Barely visible anymore, but I could feel it under my thumb. Nina called. I found her. The blonde woman. The one meeting Mark at coffee shops and bank lobbies across Phoenix. The face that appeared in Arthur's surveillance photos like a recurring ghost. Nina had a name. Rebecca Trent, 39. Real estate agent, or that's her current cover. Licensed in Arizona for 18 months. Nina delivered the profile fast. FBI briefing cadence, no wasted breath. Rebecca appeared in 2 prior victim files. In Diane Kowalski's case in Reno, she operated as Sarah Winslow, a financial wellness coach who introduced Jason Moore to Diane at a community event. In Margaret Chen's case in Tampa, she was Jennifer Marks, a senior care consultant who helped Tyler Bennett access Margaret's mother's medical records. The pattern was clear. Rebecca was the advanced scout. She identified targets, built initial trust, softened the ground. Then she introduced Mark as the closer. She opened the doors. He walked through them. But here's the part that changes everything. Nina's voice dropped the way a surgeon's drops before delivering a prognosis. Rebecca Trent and Derek Hale were married in Clark County, Nevada in 2014. I pulled the marriage certificate this morning. There is no record of divorce, no annulment, nothing. The kitchen tilted. I set my coffee down carefully. Mark is still legally married to Rebecca. Correct, which means the marriage license he filed with Vanessa is fraudulent. If the Dubai wedding proceeds, it's bigamy, a felony in both Arizona and wherever they marry. Mark wasn't just a con artist. He was planning to commit bigamy, to stand beside my sister in a Dubai venue and say vows that were legally meaningless, while his actual wife sat in a Scottsdale apartment managing the financial infrastructure of their operation. Every document Vanessa would sign as Mrs. Dalton would be void. Every financial instrument tied to the marriage would be contestable, and Mark knew this. He was counting on it. By the time anyone discovered the marriage was invalid, he'd be gone with the money. There's more, Nina said. Rebecca met with Vanessa 2 days ago. Coffee shop in Tempe. Introduced herself as a wedding planner, complimentary consultation. I have surveillance photos. Rebecca had documents on the table. Did Vanessa sign anything? Couldn't get close enough to see, but the documents were open and Vanessa was leaning over them. I worked my scheduled 12-hour shift that night. Hadn't taken a sick day in 3 years and I wasn't about to start. Not when Mark might be monitoring my routine the way he'd monitored it before the car was sold. Normal. Everything had to look normal. The ICU was its own world. Beeping monitors, hushed conversations, the squeak of sneakers on polished floors, the constant low-grade tension of lives held in mechanical balance. I moved through it with the efficiency of a decade of practice. IV adjustments, vitals checks, charting. The work steadied me, gave my hands something to do besides clench. Rosa was on the same shift. Between patient rounds, we talked in the break room with the door closed and our voices low. "How are you holding up?" Rosa asked, handing me a protein bar. "I'm holding." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." At 2 a.m, I went to my locker for a granola bar, opened it and stopped. My bag was facing the wrong direction. The zipper was on the left. I always put it on the right, always. The same way I set my instruments in the same order on every patient tray. Muscle memory, habit, certainty. Someone opened my locker. Nothing was missing. Wallet, keys, phone charger, all present. But the bag had been moved. The zipper was wrong. Someone went through my belongings while I was on the floor. I photographed the locker. Texted Nina. Told Rosa. Rosa checked the hallway camera covering the locker bay. The footage showed a woman in scrubs and a surgical mask walking down the corridor at 12:47. Not a nurse Rosa recognized. Not on the floor's staff roster for the night. "She came through the east entrance," Rosa said, replaying the footage. "Badge scan, but the number doesn't match anyone on shift. Could be stolen. Could be a visitor badge modified." A stranger in scrubs had searched my locker in the middle of the night. The anonymous text was not an empty threat. Someone was close, watching, probing, testing whether fear would make me stop. I took the protein bar out of the locker, ate it standing up, and went back to my patients. But the radar was fully engaged now. The ICU radar, the one that catches the flicker before the flatline, was no longer pointed at heart monitors. It was pointed at every unfamiliar face in the hallway. 4:30 a.m, charting at the nurse's station. My phone vibrated. Vanessa. "Hey, sis." Her voice was bright, too bright. The kind of brightness that has been rehearsed in front of someone coaching every line. "Mark and I were talking, and we feel bad about how things went with the car. He really does. He wants to make it up to you." I closed my eyes. I could almost hear Mark's voice behind her words. Coaching. Scripting. "He'd love to take us all to dinner this Friday. Just family. Talk things out. He's been stressed with the wedding planning, and he knows he came on too strong." This was a probe. Mark was using Vanessa to test my emotional state. Was I still angry? Suspicious? Had I done anything? The invitation was not reconciliation. It was reconnaissance. I made the decision in 2 seconds. Same speed I decide whether a patient needs intervention or observation. "That sounds nice, Vanessa. I'd like that." I delivered it perfectly. Warm, slightly tired, the voice of a woman who'd been working 12 hours and wanted peace with her family. No edge, no suspicion, just a sister who missed her sister. "Really?" Vanessa's relief was genuine. She wasn't acting. She truly wanted her family to get along. That sincerity, weaponized by Mark into a delivery system, made my chest ache. "Really? Tell Mark I appreciate it. Where were you thinking?" Friday, 7 p.m, their apartment. I hung up and stared at the break room ceiling. I would walk into that dinner knowing everything. Mark would not know I knew. I would smile and eat and compliment the plans and measure every word he said against every document in Arthur's folder. I would play the naive younger sister, the one Mark had already dismissed as just a night shift nurse. Arthur was swindled in '87 because he trusted someone. It taught him to see con men. I'm not an accountant. I'm not FBI. But nurses read people too. We read pain. We read fear. We read the micro-expressions of a patient who says, "I'm fine," while their heart rate tells a different story. Mark thought he was the best reader in any room. He had never been in a room with an ICU nurse who already knew his diagnosis. Home at 7:15, sunrise heating the desert. I showered, sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and called Nina. I updated her. The text, the locker, the dinner. Nina processed silently. Then, the locker was Rebecca. Has to be. She's the fieldwork partner. Mark stays clean, maintains the image. Rebecca handles surveillance, intimidation, dirty work. He charms. She controls. Can we prove it? I'll pull the hospital footage. If the woman matches Rebecca's description, that's criminal trespass and harassment. Another charge for the pile. Pause. Keystrokes. The dinner Friday. You're going. I'm going. Good. Don't record anything yet. Pure intelligence. Watch him. Watch how he controls Vanessa. You're not collecting evidence. You're reading the room. I'm an ICU nurse, Nina. Reading rooms is what I do. One more thing. Her voice hardened. I pulled Rebecca's real estate transactions for the last 18 months. She's the buyer's agent on 3 property sales in the Phoenix metro. All 3 purchased by LLCs that trace back to offshore accounts. She's not just Mark's wife and accomplice. She's laundering money through real estate. This is not a solo con man. This is an organized fraud ring. Organized fraud ring. A partnership. A machine built to find, isolate, drain, and discard vulnerable people. My grandfather didn't just uncover a con artist. He uncovered a criminal enterprise. Does Castillo know? Briefing him this afternoon. This changes the case from state to potential federal. Wire fraud across state lines. Money laundering. Conspiracy. Federal. The word sat in the morning air like something with weight. I looked at Arthur's chair. Empty, his mug on the counter. I picked it up, held it, cool ceramic against my palm. We're coming for them, Papa, I whispered. Nina's voice pulled me back. Chloe, there's something else, and you're not going to like it. I set the mug down. Rebecca met with Vanessa again yesterday. Same Tempe coffee shop. I had an operative tailing her, wedding binder on top of the table, but the pages underneath were not about floral arrangements. What were they? Financial documents. Couldn't get photos from the distance, but I watched Vanessa sign something. 2 signatures, 2 separate pages. My blood went cold. We don't know what she signed. Could be wedding contracts, could be venue paperwork. Nina paused. Or it could be the co-ownership deed for your grandfather's house, or a power of attorney. The dinner Friday isn't just intelligence anymore, Chloe. It may be our last chance to reach Vanessa before Mark locks everything down. I sat at the table. Morning light fell through the kitchen window across the empty chair. On the counter, Arthur's Folgers can sat beside the stove. Same spot, same brand. Somewhere in a Scottsdale apartment, my sister was signing documents handed to her by the wife of the man she thought she was marrying, and she had no idea. Friday was 3 days away. I opened the folder, spread its contents across the table, and started preparing for dinner the way Arthur would have prepared for a federal audit. Methodically, thoroughly, and without a shred of mercy. Friday, 6:15 in the evening. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Arthur's house wearing the turquoise blouse Vanessa gave me last Christmas. Deliberate. A peace offering signal. Something Mark would notice and read as submission. I looked at myself and thought about what Nina told me on the phone 30 minutes ago. Don't record, don't confront, don't mention Harold, the folder, the bonds, or Lucille. You're there to observe. Watch how he controls Vanessa. Watch his body language when money comes up. And find out what she signed with Rebecca. Rosa texted, "You got this. Read the room like a 12-lead EKG. If anything flatlines, get out." I picked up Arthur's Diamondbacks mug from the counter, held it for 3 seconds. A ritual now, a touchstone. Wish me luck, Papa. I drove to Scottsdale in the F-250. Desert sunset doing its thing, burnt orange melting into purple over the McDowell Mountains. Beautiful, indifferent. Arizona does not care about human drama. It just keeps burning. Pulling into the apartment complex, I noticed something I'd missed on every previous visit. The Audi was parked in a space marked Reserved, Unit 4C. But Vanessa told me they lived in 2B. Mark had a reserved space for a different unit. Why would a renter in a 1-bedroom apartment need that? I filed it. Said nothing. ICU nurses collect data before diagnosing. The apartment was 2nd floor, 1 bedroom, rented furniture trying hard to look owned. Generic art on the walls. the kind that comes with corporate housing packages. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary. Vanessa had cooked. She always cooks when she's anxious. Arthur did the same thing. Stress meant elaborate meals. Mark opened the door. Smile first, always the smile first. "Chloe, I'm glad you came." He extended his hand. I took it, noted the watch, not the Omega from 10 days ago, a Breitling, 2 luxury watches in 10 days for a man who needed $28,000 from a 60-year-old car. Vanessa was in the kitchen, aproned, flushed from cooking. She hugged me tight, genuine, desperate. "I'm so happy you're here," she whispered against my shoulder. "Please let's have a nice night." Dinner was roasted chicken, Arthur's recipe. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Mark poured wine, an expensive Napa cab I mentally priced at $60 a bottle. He filled his glass generously. Vanessa drank water. I noticed the water, filed it. I performed. Asked about the Dubai venue, complimented the apartment, mentioned how exhausted my ICU shifts had been. Positioned myself as overworked, distracted, not a threat. Mark relaxed. His shoulders dropped. His smile widened from performance into something closer to comfort. The comfort of a man who believes he's the smartest person in any room he enters. Then he started his pitch without being asked. Nina warned me about this. Narcissistic tendency. They can't resist explaining their own brilliance. "So, I've been thinking about the family's financial future. After the wedding, it makes sense to consolidate. The house is just sitting there. Property taxes, maintenance, insurance. If we sell, reinvest the equity into a diversified portfolio through my firm." "Your firm?" I kept my voice curious, not challenging. "Pinnacle Financial Advisory. We specialize in intergenerational wealth management." Pinnacle, the fake company, the LLC forged under Vanessa's name. The same name on the brochure at Lucille's kitchen table. Mark was naming his own shell company at a family dinner like it was a Fortune 500 operation. I nodded. "That sounds smart. Grandpa would have wanted us to be practical." The validation fed him. He kept talking, refinancing, equity extraction, trust restructuring. Every word was a confession delivered as a sales pitch, and I memorized every syllable while eating chicken and pretending to be impressed. Vanessa sat quietly through all of it, nodded when Mark looked at her. Didn't add to the conversation, didn't challenge, didn't question. She was the portrait of a woman who had been slowly, methodically taught that her opinion was secondary to her partner's vision. My chest ached watching it. This was my sister, the girl who used to argue with teachers until they gave up, who once talked back to a police officer during a traffic stop, who told our grandfather she would never let any man tell her what to think. That Vanessa was buried under 2 years of Mark's careful conditioning, and I was sitting 6 feet from her eating her roasted chicken, while the man who buried her smiled at me across the table. Vanessa stood. "I'll grab dessert. Chloe, you still love flan?" "Always." She disappeared into the kitchen. The partition wall blocked her view of the dining area. I heard the refrigerator open, dishes clinking, Vanessa humming a song Arthur used to sing, though she probably didn't realize the origin. The moment Vanessa was out of sight, Mark changed. It was not gradual. It was a switch. The warmth drained from his face like color, leaving a monitor readout. His eyes went flat. Reptilian. The smile vanished. What replaced it was not anger. It was assessment. Cold, calibrated assessment. The kind of look I've seen in the eyes of people who calculate others the way accountants calculate columns, reducing them to what they're worth and what they cost. "Chloe." His voice was low. Conversational. The voice of a man who doesn't need volume to deliver a threat. "I know you went to Harold Bennett's shop. I know you took something from the car. And I know you've been making phone calls you shouldn't be making." My heart rate spiked. I felt it in my carotid, the way I feel it when a patient's alarm sounds at 3 a.m, but my face stayed neutral. My hands stayed still on the table. ICU stillness. The kind that keeps patients calm while their world is ending. "I don't know what you think you found," Mark continued, leaning forward, "but I want you to understand something. Vanessa is mine. This family's future is mine to manage. And that house, your grandfather's house, is going to be sold. The question is whether you cooperate and share in the proceeds, or resist and get nothing." He paused, let it land. Then, "Your grandfather was a paranoid old man, Chloe. Whatever he left in that car was the ramblings of someone who couldn't accept that his granddaughter chose a better life. Don't make the same mistake he did." The word mistake. It hit different when I knew how Arthur died. Alone at his desk, headaches and dizzy spells he hid from everyone, working to protect his family from the man sitting 3 feet from me with a Breitling on his wrist and dead eyes behind a salesman's face. I did not flinch, did not argue, did not reveal a single card. "I just want peace, Mark. I miss my sister. That's all I came for tonight." He studied me for 3 beats. Then the switch flipped. Warmth flooded back. The smile returned. The charming fiancé reappeared exactly as Vanessa rounded the corner carrying flan on a tray. "This looks amazing, babe," Mark said, his hand finding Vanessa's waist. "Chloe, your sister is an incredible cook. I'm the luckiest man alive." Vanessa glowed. The compliment landed on soil Mark had been carefully tilling for 2 years, soil where my sister's self-worth now depended entirely on his approval. I watched her light up at his words, and I wanted to scream the truth across the table. But I ate the flan instead. It was excellent. Arthur's recipe. The taste of it almost undid me. The rest of the dinner was theater. I asked about the guest list. "Small," Mark said. "Just close friends." Which meant no witnesses who knew Vanessa's real life. I asked about the honeymoon. Dubai, then maybe the Maldives. Or maybe the Cayman Islands, where Nina traced his offshore accounts. I smiled through all of it and filed every word. Then, casually, putting on my jacket by the door, "Vanessa, Mark mentioned Pinnacle Financial. Did you guys already start getting things organized? I thought I saw some paperwork on the table last time." Vanessa hesitated, glanced at Mark. He gave the micro nod. "Permission." "Oh, that's just some preliminary stuff Rebecca helped me with. She's our wedding planner, but she also does financial consulting. She helped me sign a few things, power of attorney for Mark, so he can handle the house paperwork while we're in Dubai, and some investment authorization forms." Power of attorney. Confirmed. Vanessa had signed a POA giving Mark legal authority over her financial decisions, and investment authorization forms that almost certainly funneled her accounts into Pinnacle's shell companies. I kept my face pleasant. That's so organized. I wish I had someone helping me like that. "Rebecca's amazing," Vanessa said. "You should meet her." "I'd love that." I hugged Vanessa at the door, held her 1 beat longer than normal. She didn't notice. Mark did. In the parking lot, walking past the Audi, I glanced at the reserved space for Unit 4C. Empty now, but there was a faded oil stain on the concrete and a single long blonde hair caught on the parking bollard. Rebecca had been parking here. 4C was her unit. Mark's accomplice and legal wife lived in the same apartment complex, 30 feet from my sister. The surveillance had been happening in plain sight. Home, kitchen table, Arthur's chair empty, the taste of flan still in my mouth. I called Nina, speakerphone, Rosa patched in. I debriefed them fast. Mark named Pinnacle at dinner, POA confirmed, signed willingly but under Rebecca's false pretenses. Investment authorization forms, likely transfer documents into Pinnacle's LLCs. Mark threatened me directly when Vanessa left the room. Called Arthur a paranoid old man, Rebecca likely living in 4C. Nina, I'll confirm the lease tonight. If Rebecca is living 30 feet from Vanessa, it's not just accomplice work. It's active real-time surveillance. Patricia joined the call. The POA is the immediate crisis. With that document, Mark can authorize sales, transfers, refinancing, anything in Vanessa's name. He doesn't even need her present. We need it revoked. But if Vanessa revokes before we're ready, Mark bolts. How fast can he move? I asked. With a signed POA, he could list the house Monday morning, buyer by Wednesday, close in 30 days, money gone before you contest it. Nina, he won't wait for the wedding. The POA was the prize, not the marriage. He already has what he needs. I give it 72 hours before he makes his first move. 72 hours. The Dubai wedding was 10 days away, but Mark didn't need the wedding anymore. The POA gave him everything. Silence on the call. Then Patricia. We move Lucille's Thursday meeting up. Combine it with our play. One event, one room. Mark, Rebecca, Lucille, Vanessa, everyone together. Detective Castillo in the next room. When? Tomorrow, Saturday. I'll frame it as an emergency pre-wedding estate consultation at my office. Vanessa invites Mark. Lucille keeps her appointment. Mark thinks he's consolidating both targets under one roof. He'll love it, Nina said. 2 birds, 1 meeting, he won't resist. And Rebecca? Mark will bring her. He always brings her to closings. She's his closer, his pressure, his validator. He'll introduce her as the wedding planner or the financial advisor. The moment she walks into that room, Castillo has both of them. I hung up, sat in the dark kitchen. The lamp above the stove was the only light, the one Arthur left on every night because Clara used to get up for water and he didn't want her stumbling. He kept it on for 20 years after she died. Tomorrow. Everything converges tomorrow. In a conference room in downtown Phoenix, I would watch the man who tried to destroy my family walk into a trap my grandfather started building 18 months ago. I texted Vanessa, "Hey sis, had such a nice time tonight. Could we talk tomorrow, just us? I have something I need to tell you." 3 dots. Then, of course, come over in the morning. Mark has a golf game, just us. Just us. Exactly what I needed. Because before the trap springs on Mark, I have to tell Vanessa the truth. All of it, and she has to choose which side she stands on. Saturday, 8:12 in the morning. Mark was on the golf course, confirmed by Nina's operative, who watched him tee off at 7:45 at Greyhawk Golf Club. 18 holes, 4 hours minimum. I had a window. I drove to Scottsdale in the F-250 with the manila folder in my bag and Arthur's USB in my jacket pocket. I'd rehearsed nothing. There is no script for telling your sister that her fiancé is a bigamist who has destroyed multiple families and is planning to steal everything your dead grandfather left behind. Saturday light on the 101, softer than weekday rush. I passed the McDowell Road exit. Harold's shop was down there, the Mustang waiting. I thought about Arthur recording his video, crying into a webcam because he couldn't tell anyone the truth out loud. Today, I would say it for him. I pulled into the complex, glanced at the space for 4C. A silver Honda Civic sat there, Arizona plates, Rebecca's car 30 feet from my sister's door. Vanessa opened the door in sweatpants and Arthur's old Arizona State shirt, faded and soft from 1,000 washes. No makeup, hair in a messy bun. She looked younger than 37. She looked like the sister I grew up with. Before Mark, before the isolation, before the carefully constructed cage that she couldn't see because the bars were made of compliments and "I love you" and "let me handle everything." The apartment was different without Mark, quieter, less staged. Vanessa had put daisies in a mason jar on the table, something she used to do every Sunday at Arthur's house. A habit that belonged to the Vanessa who existed before Mark. Coffee? Please. We sat at the small kitchen table. Vanessa wrapped both hands around her mug, a nervous habit I hadn't seen since Clara's funeral. Morning sun through the east window painted stripes across the surface between us. I didn't ease into it. I've learned from the ICU that bad news delivered slowly is bad news delivered twice, once in the anticipation and once in the words. The kindest thing is clarity. Vanessa, I need to show you something, and I need you to look at all of it before you respond. Her hands tightened on the mug. This is about Mark. Yes. Chloe, if this is about the car again. It's not about the car, it's about who he is. I opened my bag, set the manila folder on the table between us. Arthur's handwriting on the tab, Derek Hale / Mark Dalton. Evidence. Grandpa Arthur put this together. Over 18 months. Before he died. He hid it inside the Mustang because he knew you wouldn't listen to him directly. I let that land. He tried, Vanessa. 3 months before his stroke, he sat you down and showed you what he'd found. Vanessa stared at the folder. Recognition, confusion, resistance crossed her face in waves. He told me he was worried about Mark's intentions, Vanessa said quietly. I told him he was being overprotective, that he couldn't stand seeing me happy because... She stopped, looked at the folder. Because he was losing control. He wasn't losing control, he was losing time. The sentence hung between us. Vanessa's eyes went glassy, but she didn't open the folder. Not yet. What's inside? The truth, all of it, and it's going to hurt, but you need to see it the way you'd want to see a diagnosis. Complete, accurate, no soft edges. Vanessa reached for the folder. Her hand trembled. She opened it. I walked her through it the way I lay out instruments on a surgical tray. Order matters, sequence matters. You don't start with the worst thing, you build. First, the Nevada DMV photo. Derek Hale. Mark's face. Unmistakable. His real name is Derek Hale. Born Reno, 1989. He changed his name legally twice. Jason Moore, then Mark Dalton. Vanessa picked up the photo, stared at it. The face she'd kissed goodnight for 2 years staring back at her under a name she'd never heard. Second, the victim files. Diane Kowalski, Margaret Chen, photos, bank records, police reports. He married Diane in Reno in 2017 as Jason Moore, stole $340,000. Her daughter wouldn't speak to her for 2 years. He married Margaret in Tampa in 2019 as Tyler Bennett, stole $285,000. Margaret attempted suicide. Vanessa read. Slowly. I watched her face the way I watch a patient absorb a terminal diagnosis, the micro stages of comprehension, each one landing like a separate blow. Shock. Then denial trying to reassemble itself. Then the first crack in the denial when the details are too specific to be invented. Third, the wedding photos. 3 different ceremonies, 3 different women, 3 different names, and in each photo, the same face. The jawline Vanessa had kissed, the smile she'd trusted, the eyes she believed saw only her. Vanessa made a sound, not a word. Involuntary, guttural, the sound of something fundamental cracking inside a person. I've heard it in the ICU. It's the sound people make when the last hope they were holding on to slips through their fingers. Fourth, the marriage certificate. Clark County, Nevada, Derek Hale and Rebecca Trent, 2014. No record of divorce, no annulment. He's still married, Vanessa. Legally married to a woman named Rebecca Trent, the woman you know as your wedding planner. Vanessa's head snapped up. Rebecca, the wedding planner? She's his wife, his accomplice. They work together. She scouts targets, builds trust, introduces Mark. She's been living in Unit 4C of this complex, 30 feet from your front door. The color drained from my sister's face. She looked toward the window, toward the parking lot, toward 4C, toward the woman she'd been confiding her hopes and anxieties to for 3 weeks. The woman who helped her pick out flowers and cake samples and a dress. The woman who handed her financial documents to sign while asking about her registry. Vanessa pushed back from the table, stood, paced to the window and back. Her breathing was ragged. No, this isn't. You're wrong. You're jealous. You've always been jealous because Grandpa loved me differently, and now you're trying to... Vanessa. Destroy the one good thing in my life because you can't stand that I moved on, and you're still living in Grandpa's house like a ghost. Vanessa, sit down. There's a video. The word stopped her. She turned. What video? I pulled out my phone, opened the file, set it on the table between us, pressed play. Arthur appeared on the screen. The desk, the green lamp, the flannel shirt, the reading glasses. Chloe, if you're watching this, then I didn't make it. Vanessa sank into her chair. Her hand covered her mouth. Arthur's voice filled the apartment. Vanessa is not at fault. She is a victim. These men know exactly what loneliness looks like and how to weaponize it. She was grieving, she was vulnerable, and he walked into her grief group wearing a dead mother's story like a costume. Vanessa was crying silently. Arthur continued. If Vanessa is watching this too, sweetheart, I need you to hear me. I tried to tell you. I sat you down and showed you what I found, and you told me I was paranoid, that I was losing my mind. And maybe you were right about some things. I am old. I am scared. But I am not wrong about this man. 40 years of reading numbers and reading people. I am not wrong. He removed his glasses, wiped his eyes. I'd seen this moment before, in Harold's office. But watching Vanessa see it was a different devastation entirely. Her grandfather speaking to her from beyond his grave, saying, I knew. I tried. You didn't believe me. I love you anyway. I love you, Vanessa. I love you enough to hide the truth in a car and pray that your sister finds it in time. Forgive me for not being braver. Forgive me for hiding instead of fighting harder." The video ended. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my sister falling apart. Then Vanessa spoke, barely a whisper. He knew everything, and I told him he was losing his mind. "You didn't know." "I should have listened. He came to me and I pushed him away and then he died and I—" Her voice broke completely. "I sold his car, Chloe. I sold the car that had the only thing that could save us. The car is safe. Harold bought it to protect it, just like Grandpa asked him to." Vanessa looked up, tears and mascara and something else. The first glimmer of fury. The kind that doesn't burn hot. The kind that freezes everything it touches into something harder than it was before. A long silence. She stared at the table, the folder, the photos, the phone with Arthur's frozen face on the pause screen. Then she put her hand on her stomach. The gesture was small, unconscious, protective. I saw it. The nurse in me saw it before the sister did. "Vanessa?" "I'm pregnant." Her voice was hollow. 8 weeks. Found out last Monday. Haven't told Mark. I was going to tell him in Dubai on our wedding night. The room tilted. 8 weeks. A baby. And the man Vanessa chose to be its father was Derek Hale, a serial predator married to another woman, the same man who drove Margaret Chen to a hospital bed with a bottle of Ambien. I did what I've done 1,000 times in the ICU when the situation is worse than anyone expected, and the patient is looking at me for an answer I don't have. I breathed, I steadied, I found the one true thing, and I said it. "You're carrying your baby, not Derek Hale's, not Mark Dalton's, your baby, Arthur's great-grandchild, and this child is going to grow up in a family that tells the truth and protects each other. That starts now." Vanessa's hand stayed on her stomach. Her eyes were red, but they were clearing, the fog of 2 years of conditioning burning off like morning mist over the desert. "What do I need to do?" "Patricia Whitfield, Grandpa's lawyer, has a plan. Today. This afternoon. Mark thinks he's attending a pre-wedding estate consultation at her office. Lucille will be there too. Mark's been targeting her as well. Detective Castillo from Phoenix PD Financial Crimes will be in the next room. We need Mark to lay out his plan on camera, and we need you to play along, one last time." "You want me to sit across from him and pretend everything is fine?" "I want you to sit across from him knowing the truth and let him hang himself with his own words." The grandfather clock in the living room, Arthur's clock, moved here when Vanessa took this apartment, ticked steadily in the silence. Then Vanessa stood, wiped her face with the hem of Arthur's Arizona State shirt, looked at me with eyes that were no longer a victim's eyes. He made me keep a notebook about Grandpa's supposed cognitive decline. 23 entries, all fabricated. He coached me on what to write and when. Her voice hardened into something I recognized. Arthur's voice. The same steel. He used me as a weapon against my own family, made me sell the car that was supposed to protect us. And he's been sleeping 30 feet from his actual wife while planning our wedding. She picked up the marriage certificate, studied it. I'll do it. I'll sit in that room and I'll smile and let him pitch every dirty detail. And when it's over, I'll watch him put in handcuffs, for Grandpa, for Diane, for Margaret, for this baby, who will never know what their biological father was because we're going to make sure he's in prison before this child is born. I reached across the table and took my sister's hand, held it. The first real touch between us since before Arthur died. The first honest moment in 2 years. I called Patricia, speakerphone. "Vanessa's in, she knows everything, she's ready." Patricia's voice was steel in satisfaction. "Good. Meeting confirmed for 3 this afternoon. Conference room B. Mark thinks it's routine pre-wedding paperwork. Lucille arrives at 2:45. Castillo's team in position by 2:30. And Chloe? Nina just confirmed. Rebecca is with Mark right now. He'll bring her. They always close together." "Then we end it together too," I said. 3 o'clock, 5 hours. The trap Arthur started building 18 months ago was about to close. 11 in the morning. Arthur's kitchen table had become a command center, 6 people around it, the most it had held since his last Thanksgiving dinner. I sat at the head, Arthur's chair. I didn't plan it. Didn't think about it, just sat down. Rosa noticed, said nothing. But I felt the weight of it. The chair where Arthur read the paper, balanced the checkbook, made his last phone calls to Nina before the stroke took everything. Vanessa sat to my left, pale but composed. She'd changed out of the sweatpants into a blouse and pressed slacks. War clothes. Her coffee mug rested between both hands, and every few minutes her left hand drifted to her stomach, unconscious, protective. Nina Salazar was across from her, laptop open, phone flat on the table, a folder of surveillance photos stacked in order. Harold Bennett sat at the far end in a clean flannel instead of his usual coveralls, driven in from Scottsdale at 9. He hadn't spoken much, didn't need to. His presence was the anchor, the man Arthur trusted enough to build a hidden compartment and keep a 23-year promise. Rosa had a notebook, logistics already mapped. Route to Patricia's office, drive time, parking, a bag packed with water, snacks, and a burner phone for Vanessa. Patricia Whitfield was on speaker from her office downtown. Her voice filled the room with the authority of a woman who had won cases against men like Mark before, and fully intended to win this one. Conference Room B, Whitfield Legal, 17th floor, 1 North Central Avenue. Security cameras in the lobby, elevator, and hallway. The conference room has 2 cameras, one visible, one concealed. Arizona is a one-party consent state. As long as one person present consents to recording, and I consent, everything Mark says is admissible. She continued. Detective Castillo and one officer will be in conference room A, separated by a shared wall and a one-way observation window. Live audio-video feed. If Mark makes statements consistent with fraud, identity theft, or conspiracy, Castillo executes the arrest warrant on the spot. Arrest warrant? I asked. Signed by Judge Torres at 9:15 this morning, based on Nina's evidence package, victim statements, financial records, forged LLCs, bigamy documentation. The warrant covers Derek Hale, also known as Mark Dalton, Jason Moore, Tyler Bennett. Separate warrant for Rebecca Trent as co-conspirator. The warrants were signed. The judge had seen everything. This was no longer investigation. This was execution. Nina briefed Vanessa on her role, the most critical, the most painful. You called Mark this morning and told him Patricia, your grandfather's estate attorney, wants a pre-wedding meeting to finalize the inheritance paperwork. You framed it as your idea. Babe, let's get everything squared away before Dubai. Mark agreed immediately. He was thrilled, Vanessa confirmed. Her voice was flat. Said it was exactly what he'd been hoping for. He'll bring documents, pre-prepared forms, investment proposals, whatever he needs you to sign. Your job is to let him present. Ask easy questions. How does this work? Let him explain. Every detail he gives is another nail. What about Rebecca? Mark texted her this morning. Nina intercepted it through the phone tap Castillo authorized. He told her to come as his financial advisor. She'll be there. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Good, I want to see her face. Harold spoke for the first time. What about Lucille? Patricia answered, Lucille arrives at 2:45, 15 minutes before Mark. She'll already be seated, comfortable, with coffee. When Mark walks in and sees her, he'll think it's a bonus. 2 targets, 1 meeting. He'll be greedy. Greed makes people careless. Rosa raised something I hadn't considered. What if Mark gets suspicious when he sees Chloe? He won't, Patricia said. Chloe told him at dinner she wanted peace. She'll be there as moral support for Vanessa, family solidarity. Mark will read it as Chloe falling in line. His narcissism will fill in the blanks for us. The plan was tight. Everyone knew their role. At 12:30, we left Arthur's house in separate vehicles. Nina and Rosa in Nina's sedan, Harold in his truck, Vanessa and I together in the F-250. 10 minutes of silence on the drive downtown. Vanessa stared out the window. I drove. The Phoenix skyline rose ahead, glass and steel shimmering in afternoon heat. Somewhere inside that skyline, Patricia's conference room was waiting, cameras rolling, Castillo briefing his team. And Mark was finishing his round at Greyhawk Golf Club, texting Vanessa heart emojis, completely unaware that the last free Saturday of his life was ticking away. Patricia's office was glass walls and modern furniture. The kind of law firm that charges $400 an hour and earns it. The receptionist led us to conference room B. Long table, 8 leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The visible camera sat in the ceiling corner. The concealed one was inside the video conferencing screen on the wall, impossible to spot unless you knew. Lucille arrived at 2:45, escorted by Rosa. Navy blue dress, pearl buttons, the one she wore to church and to Frank's memorial every year. Hair freshly set. She looked dignified and slightly nervous, which was exactly the impression Mark needed. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Terrified," Lucille admitted. Then, "and furious. That little weasel used Frank's name for his fake company. My Frank, who worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years building something real. My Frank, whose name belongs on laundromats and grandchildren's birth certificates and nowhere near that man's filth." She straightened her collar. "I'm ready." At 2:55, Nina texted from the lobby. Mark entering building, Rebecca with him, both in the elevator. I looked at Vanessa. She nodded. Her hand drifted to her stomach once, then dropped. Her face set into the mask she'd been wearing for 2 years. The loving fiancé, the trusting partner, one last performance. Patricia entered the conference room, sat at the head of the table. Legal pad, pen, water. The posture of a woman who'd done this 100 times and never tired of the part where the door opened. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Footsteps. The door opened. Mark entered first. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, the relaxed professional look. Leather portfolio under his arm, monogrammed. His smile swept the room. Patricia, Vanessa, me, Lucille. He didn't miss a beat when he saw Lucille. If anything, his smile widened. "Mrs. Harmon, what a pleasant surprise." He crossed to her, took her hand in both of his. "How's Butterscotch? Still ruling the porch?" He remembered the cat's name. He remembered the porch. Details collected during his 4 visits to her home, filed away the way a predator memorizes the layout of a henhouse. Lucille smiled, played her part. "Oh, you know Butterscotch, still the king." Behind Mark, Rebecca Trent entered. Blonde, tailored cream blazer, tablet and folder in hand. She scanned the room fast, the scan of someone who assesses environments the way I assess patient rooms, looking for threats. Her eyes passed over me and held for one extra beat. Mark introduced her. "This is Rebecca, my financial advisor. She's been coordinating the estate planning." Patricia stood, shook Rebecca's hand. "Welcome. Shall we begin?" They sat, Mark at one end, Vanessa beside him, Rebecca on his other side. I sat across from Mark, Lucille beside me, Patricia at the head. Harold was in the lobby with Nina, monitoring the live feed on her laptop. Patricia opened warm, professional. "Mark, Vanessa asked me to facilitate this meeting to ensure the family's estate is properly structured before the wedding. I understand you have some proposals regarding the house, the trust, and the financial accounts. Walk us through your thinking." Mark opened his portfolio, printed documents, charts, spreadsheets with projected returns. He'd prepared, he'd rehearsed. He'd done this before, many times, in many rooms, with many families. He began, confident, articulate, convincing. "The Ramirez estate, Arthur's legacy, is currently fragmented. The house is co-owned by Vanessa and Chloe, which complicates any future sale or refinance. The trust is locked, irrevocable unfortunately, but Vanessa's share of the savings and the house equity represent significant untapped potential." Professional slides on his tablet, return projections, risk assessments. It looked legitimate. It sounded legitimate. A person without Arthur's folder would have been impressed. My recommendation: transfer the house into single ownership under Vanessa. Simplifies the title, reduces complications. Simultaneously redirect the savings into a managed portfolio through Pinnacle Financial Advisory, my firm, where returns will significantly outperform the current bank rate. He turned to Lucille, seamlessly, as though she'd always been part of the agenda. "Mrs. Harmon, I know we've discussed something similar for your holdings. The laundromats generate revenue, but the underlying real estate is the real asset. If you're interested, we can fold everything into the same diversified structure, strength in numbers." He was doing it, on camera. in a lawyer's conference room, with a detective listening through the wall. He was pitching the liquidation of two families' assets into his own shell company, the company registered under Vanessa's forged signature, and he was doing it with the confidence of a man who had never been caught. Vanessa nodded along. "That makes sense, babe." Her voice was steady. Under the table, her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. Lucille played her part perfectly. "So you'd manage everything? The laundromats, the property, the investments?" "Absolutely. One streamlined structure, less paperwork, better returns. I'm always a phone call away." The lies flowed like water, each one documented, each one admissible, each one another year on his sentence. Patricia let Mark talk for 12 minutes. He covered the house sale timeline, the refinance structure, the LLC transfers, projected returns, Lucille's portfolio. Every word recorded, every slide documented. Castillo behind the wall had heard enough for a dozen charges. Then Patricia asked the question she'd been saving. "Mark, I want to make sure I understand the Pinnacle structure. You mentioned it's your firm. Walk me through the ownership." Mark didn't hesitate. Pinnacle Financial Advisory LLC is registered in Arizona. Vanessa is listed as co-owner. We set that up together, and the operational management runs through a subsidiary I oversee directly. "And the subsidiary? That's registered under your name? Mark Dalton?" "Correct." Patricia wrote something on her legal pad, pushed it across the table. "Not to Mark, to me." I read it. "He just confirmed LLC control on record. Castillo is ready." Patricia folded her hands, looked at Mark. Her expression shifted from professional warmth to something much colder, the expression of a lawyer who has just watched her opposing party confess on camera. "Thank you, Mark. Very thorough." She paused. The pause was deliberate, theatrical even. Patricia understood pacing the way I understand heart rhythms. "One more question. When you established Pinnacle and listed Vanessa as co-owner, did Vanessa sign the incorporation documents herself, or did someone else handle that?" The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally, but I felt it. The shift that happens in the ICU when the rhythm on the monitor stutters, when the patient who was stable is suddenly not. Mark's smile held, but his left hand twitched on the table. Involuntary, the body betraying the performance. "Vanessa signed everything herself, of course." Vanessa looked at him. For the first time in the meeting, she did not nod, did not smile. She just looked. Rebecca shifted in her chair. She'd been quiet the entire meeting, validator, silent pressure. But now her eyes were moving, reading the room. Something was wrong, and she could feel it the way a predator feels the edge of a trap closing. Her gaze landed on me, held. Then she looked at the conference room door, the one that connected to conference room A. The door opened. Detective Ray Castillo stepped through. 52 years old, built like a middleweight, badge on his belt, weapon holstered. Behind him, a second officer, both in plain clothes, both radiating the particular calm of law enforcement entering a controlled space where every variable has been accounted for. Mark's smile died, not gradually, instantly, like a monitor going flatline. "Mr. Dalton," Castillo said. He stopped, corrected himself. The correction was deliberate, surgical. "Mr. Hale, I'm Detective Ray Castillo, Phoenix PD Financial Crimes Division. Please remain seated." Mark's eyes darted. To the door. To the windows, 17th floor, no exit. To Rebecca, whose face had gone chalk white. To Vanessa, who was looking at him the way you look at something you have finally identified after years of misdiagnosis. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." The charm was back, reflexive, automatic, a drowning man grabbing for the only lifeline he'd ever known. "I'm a financial consultant. This is a routine estate meeting. My fiancé can confirm—" "Your fiancé," Castillo said, pulling out a document. "Or your wife?" He set the Clark County marriage certificate on the table. Rebecca Trent and Derek Hale, 2014. Active, no dissolution. The room held its breath. 3 seconds of absolute silence. The marriage certificate sat on the conference table between Mark and Castillo like a lit fuse. Fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere 17 floors below, Phoenix traffic moved and did not care. Then Mark's face moved. I watched it happen with the clinical precision I use to read a patient crashing. The stages of a system failing, playing out in real time across the features of a man who had controlled every room he'd entered for 15 years. Denial first, the charm reloaded, automatic, muscular. Detective, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Mark Dalton, financial consultant. This is my fiancée, Vanessa Ramirez. Routine estate meeting. I have no idea what this document is. Steady, reasonable. He gestured toward the certificate without touching it. Castillo didn't respond. Let the silence work. Mark pivoted to Vanessa. His hand reached across the table for hers. Babe, tell them who I am. Tell them we're getting married in 9 days. Vanessa did not take his hand. She did not speak. She did not move. She sat with both hands flat on the table and looked at Mark with an expression I had never seen on my sister's face. Not grief, not anger, recognition. The terrible final recognition of seeing someone clearly for the first time after years of watching a performance. Mark's hand hovered in the air between them. Empty. Vanessa's refusal to take it was louder than any accusation anyone in that room could have made. He pivoted to Patricia. Ms. Whitfield, this is highly irregular, producing unverified documents in a client meeting. I'd like to call my lawyer. Patricia leaned back. You're welcome to call your attorney, Mr. Hale. But everything said in this room for the past 23 minutes has been recorded legally, and the warrant Detective Castillo is holding was signed this morning based on 18 months of evidence from a former FBI investigator, 2 prior victims, and the forensic accounting work of Arthur Ramirez. Arthur's name landed in the room like a stone in still water. I watched Mark's face. The reaction was micro, a flicker, a tightening of the jaw, but it was there. He'd dismissed Arthur as a paranoid old man. He was wrong. The rage came fast. Less than 5 seconds for Mark to realize that Charm was dead. The lawyer wasn't his ally. The detective had a warrant. Vanessa wasn't reaching for his hand, and the room had become a cage. He turned on Vanessa first, always the partner first. You did this. Low, pressurized, the voice I heard at the dinner table when Vanessa left to get dessert. The real voice. You went to your sister. You went behind my back. After everything I did for you, after I gave you a future, a plan, a wedding, you betrayed me. Vanessa flinched. The flinch was real. 2 years of conditioning doesn't vanish in one afternoon. But she didn't look away. Her hands stayed flat on the table. Mark saw the flinch and pressed harder. You're nothing, Vanessa. You were nothing when I found you, crying in a church basement about your dead grandfather, desperate for anyone to tell you that you mattered. I gave you that. And this is how you repay me? Then he turned to me, full weight of his contempt, unmasked, undiluted. And you, the night shift nurse who thinks she's a detective. You found some papers in an old car and you think you cracked the case? Your grandfather was a dying old man playing FBI in his living room. He didn't stop anything. He just delayed it. I looked at Mark. Didn't flinch, didn't respond. I've held hands of dying patients while families screamed at me. A con man calling me names doesn't register on the scale of things that have tested me. I reached into my bag, pulled out the laptop, set it on the table facing Mark. Pressed play. Arthur appeared, the desk, the green lamp, the flannel, the trembling hands. Chloe, if you're watching this, then I didn't make it. His voice filled the conference room 6 months after his death, in the presence of the man he spent his final months investigating. Mark stared at the screen, the rage drained. What replaced it was something I'd seen once in the ICU, when a patient fighting for days finally understands the fight is over. Not acceptance. The absence of options. I hired an investigator. I gathered the evidence. I traced the money. I found the victims. And I hid everything in the only place I knew would reach my granddaughter. Because men like you, Mark or Derek or Jason or whatever name you're wearing today, men like you always underestimate the people who build things slowly. You think patience is weakness. You think loyalty is stupidity. You think a 60-year-old car is just metal. Arthur removed his glasses, looked directly into the camera, and for a moment it was as though he was looking directly at Mark, through the screen, through the months, through the barrier between the living and the dead. But that car carried 40 years of my weekends. It carried my wife's memory. It carried the evidence that will end your career and your freedom. And it carried my granddaughter, the one you called just a night shift nurse, straight to the truth. The room was silent. Castillo watched from beside the door. Patricia had stopped writing. In the lobby, Harold put his hand over his mouth and turned away from the screen. Arthur's final words, the ones I'd heard alone in Harold's office, now heard by the man they were ultimately meant for. Scammers have a smell. I smelled it once before in 1987, when a man I trusted took $80,000 from me. I learned that smell. I never forgot it. And the first time I shook your hand, Mark, I knew. The video ended. The screen went dark. Arthur's face, the brown eyes, the reading glasses, the half-second of that crinkled smile at the very end, lingered in the room like warmth after a fire goes out. Mark was staring at the blank screen. His face was gray, not angry, not defiant. Gray. The color of a man who has just been confronted by someone he cannot charm, cannot threaten, cannot outlast, because that person is already gone, and the evidence they left behind is indestructible. He knew, Mark said, barely a whisper. Not to anyone in the room, to himself. The old man knew the whole time. From the first handshake, I said quietly. He told me. Castillo stepped forward. Mr. Hale, please stand. Mark didn't stand. His legs had stopped cooperating with his brain. The man who walked into this room 40 minutes ago, confident, portfolio under his arm, couldn't stand. Vanessa stood instead. She pushed her chair back. The sound scraped across the floor, sharp, final, the sound of a door closing. She faced Mark across the table. Her voice shook, but the words didn't. My name is Vanessa Ramirez. Arthur Ramirez's granddaughter. You told me my grandfather was paranoid. You told me he was losing his mind. You made me write a notebook, 23 entries, documenting cognitive decline that didn't exist so you could use it to discredit him if he ever spoke up. She paused. Her hand moved to her stomach. I sold his car because you told me it was the practical thing to do. I signed a power of attorney because you told me it was for our future. I pushed away my sister because you told me she was jealous. Everything you told me was a lie. Every single word. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the engagement ring, set it on the table beside the marriage certificate. You are not my fiancé. You were never going to be my husband, and this child. She placed both hands on her stomach, the first time she'd acknowledged the pregnancy in front of Mark. Will never know your name. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lucille stood. 78 years old. 5'2", pearl buttons on a navy dress. She walked around the table slowly, deliberately, the way a woman walks who has buried a husband and raised foster children, and survived everything life has thrown at her for nearly 8 decades. She stopped in front of Mark. You registered your fake company under my husband's name. Her voice was steady and cold as desert stone at midnight. Frank Harmon, a man who worked 60 hours a week for 40 years building laundromats with his hands, a man who never cheated anyone out of a nickel, you put his name on your filth. She leaned closer, not threateningly, with the quiet authority of a woman who no longer has anything to fear. Arthur Ramirez was my neighbor for 30 years. He did my taxes. He fixed my fence. He brought me soup when Frank died. And even after Arthur was gone, he found a way to protect me from you, because that's what real men do. They build things. They protect people. They don't steal. She straightened, looked Mark in the eye. You lost, young man. Not to the detective, not to the lawyer, to a dead accountant and an ICU nurse and a widow with a cat. Remember that. She turned, walked back to her chair, sat, folded her hands. The room was completely still. Castillo broke the silence. Mr. Hale, stand up. You have the right to remain silent. Mark stood. The second officer stepped forward. Handcuffs clicked, the sound small, metallic, final. Miranda rights read in Castillo's measured baritone. Mark's wrists behind his back. The charcoal suit bunched at the shoulders. The Breitling caught the fluorescent light. One last flash of the costume before it became evidence. Rebecca hadn't moved from her chair. She'd watched everything with the stillness of someone calculating probabilities. Now Castillo turned to her. Mrs. Hale. The use of her legal married name was deliberate. There's a warrant for your arrest as well. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity fraud, money laundering through real estate transactions. Rebecca stood, slowly, placed her tablet on the table, extended her wrists. No resistance, no denial, no performance. She understood the math before anyone else in the room. The game was over, and cooperation was the only remaining asset. Officers escorted Mark toward the door. As he passed my chair, his legs hesitated. He looked at me. Up close, his eyes were ordinary. Brown, unremarkable. The eyes of a man you'd trust to manage your retirement. That ordinariness was the weapon. "Your grandfather was clever," he said quietly. "I didn't see him coming." "No one ever did. That was his whole thing." The officer pulled him forward, through the door, down the hallway, into the elevator. I didn't follow. I heard the handcuffs click. That was enough. The silence that followed was different. That earlier silence was tension. This was release. I felt it the way I feel the shift after a successful code, when monitors steady and someone says, "We got him back." Vanessa sat in her chair, tears rolling silently. Not grief. Release. Rosa beside her, arm around her shoulders, saying nothing. Lucille was at the window looking out at the city. Butterscotch at home on the porch, unaware. She'd tell him later. She told Butterscotch everything. Harold appeared in the doorway, eyes red, crossed to me, placed both hands on my shoulders the way Arthur used to when I was small and had done something he was proud of. "He'd be so proud of you, kid, both of you." I looked at the empty chair. Arthur was never really in the chair. He was in the folder, the video, the lavender, the Mustang, Harold's loyalty, the truth hidden inside 60-year-old metal. "Ong oi song roy," I whispered. Vietnamese. The language Arthur taught me when I was small, the language we used for secrets. "Grandpa, it's done." Patricia collected her pad. "Criminal case is Castillo's now. Federal prosecutors will take over, wire fraud and laundering cross state lines. But we're not done. POA revoked immediately. LLCs dissolved. Accounts frozen. Civil suits for Vanessa, Lucille, Diane, Margaret. Mark and Rebecca's assets subject to forfeiture." She paused. Softer. "And Chloe, your grandfather's safe deposit box. Orozco at Wells Fargo told me Arthur came in twice. The second visit was 2 days before his stroke. He added something for Vanessa when the time was right." She looked at my bag. "You have an envelope you haven't opened." The sealed envelope. "For Vanessa. Give her this when she's ready." It had been in my bag since the vault, through everything, waiting. The way everything Arthur built was designed to wait until the moment it was needed most. I looked at Vanessa. She looked back. 2 sisters, Arthur's granddaughters, bruised and standing. "Let's go home," I said. "We have one more thing to open." 2 months later, the kitchen smelled like Folgers and prenatal vitamins. Arthur's house, the oak table, the stove light that had been on since Clara died. But it felt different now. Shoes by the front door, a vitamin bottle on the counter, baby name books beside the toaster. Vanessa lived here now. I poured coffee into Arthur's Diamondback's mug, every morning. Not a shrine, a habit. I opened my laptop, Patricia's weekly case update, a Saturday ritual now. Derek Hale was indicted on federal charges 6 weeks ago. Wire fraud, identity fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy. The U.S. Attorney's Office took the case after the FBI reviewed Castillo's evidence. Nina's former colleagues called her to say the file was the most complete private investigation they'd ever received. Arthur would have liked that. Derek was held without bail. His public defender tried for a 12-year plea. The judge reviewed victim statements from Diane, Margaret, Vanessa, and Lucille. Denied it. Trial set for September. Prosecutors asking 15 to 18. Rebecca took the deal. Full cooperation. Named every LLC, every offshore account, every alias across 11 years. 4 years minimum security plus 5 supervised release. I didn't feel satisfaction, didn't feel rage. Something more complicated. The recognition that Rebecca was both predator and product. She'd serve her time. Whether she came out different wasn't my story to write. Civil suits were moving. Mark's assets, Rebecca's 7 properties across 3 states, all frozen pending forfeiture. Patricia estimated 60 to 70% recovery. Not everything, but enough to rebuild. Diane Kowalski called last week. Her voice was lighter. Rachel called me, first time in 2 years. She saw the coverage, said, "Mom, I should have believed you." 4 words, 7 years of silence. 4 words fixed it. Vanessa came downstairs. 4 months pregnant now, the curve visible beneath Arthur's old Arizona State shirt. Messy bun, no makeup. She looked like herself for the first time in months. "Coffee?" "Decaf, doctor's orders." She made a face. "Grandpa would have been horrified." We laughed. The sound filled the kitchen, 2 sisters laughing at the table where we cried and fought and planned a sting operation. Laughter belonged here now. I reached into the kitchen drawer, set the sealed envelope on the table. "For Vanessa, give her this when she's ready." Arthur's handwriting, the same hand that labeled our lunchboxes and signed our report cards. Vanessa stared at it, hand on her stomach. "I thought it might be more evidence," I said. "It's not." She opened it carefully, sliding her finger under the seal the way Arthur opened mail, never tearing. Inside, a letter and a life insurance policy. $150,000. Arthur Ramirez, policyholder. Vanessa Ramirez, sole beneficiary. Purchased 14 months before his death, around the same time he hired Nina and started hiding evidence in the Mustang. Building 2 things at once. A weapon to destroy Mark, a safety net to catch Vanessa after. The letter. Arthur's handwriting, shakier than the evidence folder. Written closer to the end. "My dear Vanessa, if Chloe is giving you this, then the hard part is over. The man is gone. The truth is out. And you're standing because Ramirez women always stand. I know you'll blame yourself. Don't. I was swindled once too, 87, a man I called a friend. I blamed myself for a decade before I understood. The shame belongs to the thief, not the robbed. You trusted someone. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. Open-hearted, brave, my Vanessa who danced in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. This money is for you, for starting over, for whatever comes next, whether that's school or travel or a house or just breathing room to figure out who you are without someone telling you who to be. I love you. I always loved you. Even when you told me I was losing my mind. Even when you sold the car. Especially when you sold the car because that meant the plan worked. Harold bought it. Chloe found the compartment. And here we are. You're going to be okay, sweetheart. You come from people who build things slowly and never give up. That's your inheritance, not money, not a car, stubbornness and love. All my heart, Papa Bear. She read it twice. The second time out loud, voice breaking on Papa Bear. The name she called him until she was 12, and he called her until the day he died. She folded the letter, held it against her chest. He still loved me, even after everything. Especially after everything. Silence. The stove light hummed. 2 sisters holding the last words he ever wrote while a baby grew between them. 3 in the afternoon, flatbed trailer turning onto our street. We stepped onto the porch. Harold's truck in the driveway, the same spot Mark once parked his leased Audi. Rosa in the passenger seat claimed she needed to supervise, but she just wanted to see the car come home. On the flatbed, the '66 Mustang. Candy apple red, Arthur's custom mix, burgundy undertone shifting like dark wine. Chrome gleaming. Every bolt as he left it. The Mustang rolled down the ramp under its own weight, tires touching Arthur's driveway. The oil stain shaped like a cracked heart lined up beneath the engine block. Home. Harold handed me the keys. Brass keychain, worn smooth, leather fob with a pressed lavender sprig laminated inside. Fully restored. Replaced the radiator hose and resealed the trunk gasket. Arthur had it on his list, note in the glove box. Radiator hose, trunk gasket before Chloe's birthday. Finished it for him. Let me pay you, Harold. Arthur paid years ago. Said if the car ever came to my shop, hold it, restore it, return it free. Covered parts, labor, and his words, emotional distress. The man budgeted for emotional distress. That's an accountant for you. He hugged me. Not a handshake. A hug that carried 23 years of friendship that outlasted death. Vanessa ran her hand along the fender, stopped at the driver's door, opened it. The lavender sachet still hung from the rearview mirror. Harold had replaced the dried flowers with fresh ones from Lucille's garden. "I'm sorry I sold you," Vanessa whispered to the car. Her voice cracked on it, and I understood she wasn't really apologizing to the Mustang. She was apologizing to Arthur. Then she looked at me with a small broken smile. "Don't tell anyone I apologized to a car." "Your secret's safe." The weeks settled into something quieter. Each person found their way forward. Lucille's 4 laundromats were safe. She framed the Pinnacle brochure and hung it in her kitchen. Joined the Maricopa County Elder Fraud Awareness Coalition, spoke at senior centers twice a month, started every talk. "My name is Lucille Harmon. A con man tried to steal my husband's legacy. A dead accountant, an ICU nurse, and a cat named Butterscotch stopped him. Still baked lemon bars every Thursday, started adding lavender sugar. Arthur's garden still growing in her yard. Nina's evidence package became an FBI training template. Rosa got promoted to charge nurse and appointed herself Vanessa's birthing coach, hospital bag already packed with 3 containers of Lucille's lemon bars inside. Patricia's forfeiture proceedings ground forward, $1.8 million in real estate to be liquidated. Justice moves slower than revenge, she told me, but it carries heavier. Margaret Chen started a support group in Tampa, Survivors of Romance Fraud, 12 members. She emailed, "Your grandfather gave me proof I wasn't stupid. I was targeted. There's a difference. I teach that difference every Tuesday." I established the Arthur Ramirez Scholarship at Mesa Community College. $10,000 a year for students in accounting or finance. The essay prompt, describe a time someone in your family protected you and what you learned. First recipient was Sophia, 19, raised by her grandmother. Her essay described a shoebox of receipts under the bed. Abuela said numbers don't lie, and if you know the numbers, nobody can cheat you. Arthur would have loved her. Saturday morning, 5:45, sky still violet. I opened the garage, the Mustang in its spot, tools on their shadow boards. I'd started using them, changing oil, checking plugs, tightening the alternator belt. Arthur's restoration journal open on the bench. I wrote in it now, new entries. Continuing the book he started 40 years ago. I turned the key. The 440 Magnum fired, vibrating through the wheel, through the seat, up my spine, the sound of patience. Down the driveway, past Lucille's house, Butterscotch in the window, past the block where Arthur taught me to ride a bicycle, past the grief center on McDowell, different people in those chairs now. East toward the Superstition Mountains, the stretch of desert where Arthur took 16-year-old me for my first lesson in this car. I could still hear him in the passenger seat, calm as always, one hand braced on the dash, the other pointing at the road ahead. "Both hands on the wheel, kiddo. Feel the engine. Don't fight it. Listen." Sun broke the ridge. Gold across red sand and saguaro and the endless patient desert that has watched generations of Ramirez women drive through it. I rolled the window down. Desert air, cool, clean, tasting of creosote and the ghost of lavender from the sachet on the mirror. I reached up, touched it. The dried flowers rustled like a whisper. "I drove it, Papa. I remember everything. The car, the numbers, the patience." The engine rumbled. Desert scrolling past. "Vanessa's naming him Arthur, baby Art. He'll grow up in your house, sleep in the room we painted blue, and when he's old enough, I'll put him in this seat. Both hands on the wheel, feel the engine, listen." He didn't leave me a car. He left me a shield, a map, and a lesson I'll carry until it's my turn to leave something behind. The lesson is this: protecting the people you love doesn't require shouting. It doesn't require money or power or a badge. It requires patience, attention, and the willingness to build something slowly and trust that when the time comes, it will hold. One more thing, something Arthur never said out loud but lived every single day. You're never too old to fight for justice, and you're never too young to listen to the people who fought before you. So that's my story. That's what happened when my sister sold my grandfather's Mustang for a man who didn't deserve her and a wedding that was never real. That's what a 60-year-old car, a manila folder, and a video from a man who loved us more than he loved his own safety managed to do. I tell you this because I know some of you are living your own version of it. Maybe not a con man, maybe not a car, but someone in your life isn't who they say they are. Someone is making you feel small. Someone is telling you your instincts are wrong, that you're too old, too emotional, too paranoid, and deep down, you know the truth. Trust that feeling. It's not paranoia, it's wisdom. Arthur taught me that. If this story reminded you of someone you love, a mother, a sister, a grandmother, a friend, share it with her. Not because I'm asking you to share a video, because she deserves to hear that ordinary women can fight back and win. She deserves to know that patience is power, and she deserves to know she's not alone. If you've been here with me through all 12 chapters, if you stayed through the empty garage and the dinner and the sting and the arrest and the drive, thank you. You didn't just watch a story, you sat with me through the hardest thing I've ever lived through. That means something. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me about the Arthur in your life, the person who built something quietly and left it behind for you to find. I read every single one. If you want more stories like this, stories about real people fighting for justice, protecting their families, turning the tables on the ones who tried to break them, subscribe, hit the bell. I'll be here. And Grandpa, if you're listening from wherever accountants go when they're done balancing the books, the car runs beautifully, the lavender is blooming, and your great-grandson kicks every time I start the engine. I think he likes the rumble. Some details in this story have been changed for privacy and safety. The people are real. The pain was real. And the Mustang? Still parked in the garage, right where it belongs. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.